On August 4th, 2024, in Spokane, Washington, 5,000 fans cheered on as Ween played an epic 2.5-hour, 32-song set, with 2 encores. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, Ween had managed to weasel their way into the fringes of pop culture through occasional appearances on the radio, in movies, and on television shows that their music helped inspire.
But now, we've got the honour of seeing 2 blokes from Pennsylvania who allegedly call themselves Ween. And I'm particularly looking forward to this. I'm going to sit back and enjoy it.
I've checked it up in the phone book and they are called that.
Yeah?
Hey.
But unlike other long-lived institutions like U2, Pearl Jam, or the Rolling Stones, Ween continually reinvented themselves, completely retooling their sonic profile album to album and even song to song. All of this material, plus a wealth of unreleased but well-loved deep cuts, fueled a 3-decade-long spree of mind-blowing live performances. And each live performance of a studio track was the definitive version, depending on who you asked. Every one of the 5,000 fans in attendance that night knew it would be a show to remember. But what they didn't know was that it would be the band's last for the foreseeable future.
Oh, we're Ween.
What's a Ween?
We're a band, you know.
Out of nowhere, out of the total musical vacuum, out of total darkness, comes one ray of light. And it's fucking Ween.
Aaron Freeman was born March 17, 1970, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Mickey Melchiondo was born 6 months later in Trenton, New Jersey, on September 25th. The two met in 1984 during 8th grade in New Hope, PA, but initially didn't like each other. According to Aaron, he was a jock, and I was more of a trench coat guy, but we sat next to each other in typing class and both realized we were into music. Among their shared interests were artists like Prince, the Beatles, and Pink Floyd, as well as funk acts like Funkadelic and Sly and the Family Stone, all of which left an indelible impact on their creative output. One day, Aaron brought a blank cassette to school. That morning in typing class, Aaron and Mickey took the cassette's J-card insert, wedged it into a typewriter, and typed a single word: Ween. Afterwards, the two came up with 10 song titles and went to Mickey's house after school to record them. They reverse-engineered the songs from the titles and, using an incomplete drum set and an out-of-tune guitar, committed their new compositions to tape. Thus, Ween was born. The name Ween was a crude combination of the words wuss and penis, which Mickey felt perfectly described the music they were making. The two would adopt stage names, with Aaron becoming Gene Ween, or Jeaner, and Mickey becoming Dean Ween, or Deaner. Gene and Dean's first show as Ween was at their high school talent show in 1986, where, after a theatrical entrance,
the band that you are about to witness is a legend, a living legend, a legend that will live a lifetime long after all of the other living legends have died. You are about to witness a band that was labeled by NME magazine as being the greatest thing since cheese. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome, from New Hope, Pennsylvania, Ween!
The band allegedly performed a cover of Purple Haze with Chris Williams, later Mean Ween, on bass. Though many claim this to be the footage of that initial performance, I have my doubts that the song they're playing is Purple Haze. Though with early Ween, I guess anything is possible. From a picture taken right after the event, I can pick out Gene on vocals and guitar, with his goggles and trench coat, Mean Ween with the white bandana on bass, which would leave either Carl Weimer of Instant Folk Death or Deaner on drums. Between 1985 and 1989, Ween would self-publish and promote at least 6 cassettes: Mrs. Slack, Erica Peterson's Flaming Crib Death, Ween 2, Axis, Bold as Boognish, The Crucial Squeegee Lip, The Live Brain Wedgie / WAD, and Prime 5, along with the split release with local band Smersh and an Aaron Freeman solo tape called Synthetic Socks. These are partially lost media, and what we do have is pretty rough, at times almost verging on no wave or musique concrète. That said, a few of the songs from these tapes would make their way onto later releases, albeit in a slightly higher fidelity, like You F***ed Up, Bumblebee, I Got the Weasel, and Stacy. I wouldn't say any of these tapes are necessarily great, but if you're interested in checking one out, I would go with Bold as Boognish, which is closest sonically to their second album, The Pod. Bold as Boognish also features a 15-minute long suite called Opus 51 Fugue Trilogy in A. Go figure. An important concept to introduce here is the idea of brown music. Brown, roughly translated as not right but wrong in a good way, is a term often used to describe Ween's early work, from their cassette era on through to their third studio album, Pure Guava. For an example of brown in practice, Diener was more than able to shred guitar solos in the late 80s, as attested by live recordings from this period, but would often choose to record short, messy, atonal guitar parts on tape, meaning the sonic quality and musicianship of these early Ween releases were, at least partially, intentional. While working at a gas station, Dean would frequently pass out cassettes and zines, trying to get their music heard by as many people as possible. As you can imagine, Ween eventually had quite the reputation in New Hope. Along with the music they recorded, Gene and Dean also made up extensive lore surrounding their lyrics. Some characters and motifs from these lo-fi 80s cassettes continued as thematic through-lines well into their major label releases. One important development from this time was that of Boognish, the demon god whose likeness acts as the band's logo. According to Ween, Boognish commanded Gene and Dean to commit his teachings to tape, inspiring them to record over 1,000 songs in a short period of time. Boognish is a common character in the band's early works, and still makes appearances in their later releases, if you know where to look. Ween would frequently play at beloved New Hope venue John and Peters, as well as City Gardens, a Trenton nightclub that, before its closure in 2001, acted as a stomping ground for many renowned musicians like Danzig, Curtis Blow, The Ramones, R.E.M., and Sonic Youth. These early shows consisted of Gene and Dean on guitar and vocals, accompanied by a DAT, or DAT machine, which acted as their drummer.
What are you saying? What? Drums?
Gene would often wear a chef's hat and swim goggles, while Dean would wear a red skull cap. Through their connections at City Gardens, Ween were able to open for bands like Gwar, Butthole Surfers, They Might Be Giants, and Roland's Band, which exposed them to a wider audience. One fateful night in 1989, Ween opened for the New Jersey post-hardcore outfit Skunk. Skunk was comprised of Matt Sweeney, the future guitarist of Chavez, Matt Quigley, who would go on to form Vaganza, and, on drums, Claude Coleman, who formed an instant connection with Ween. As Ween took the stage that night, they had no idea that Dave Ayers was in the audience, an A&R rep for indie record label Twin Tone, which had signed artists like The Replacements, Babes in Toyland, and Soul Asylum. Ayers had come that night to see Skunk, but as the DAT machine began ticking away, and Gene and Dean Ween stepped into the light, he set his sights on a new target. On the night of February 2nd, 1990, punk legend Henry Rollins booked City Gardens as one stop on a tour of his spoken word material. Opening for Rollins was Ween, who played to mixed reactions.
Dude, man! What's the proverb, asshole? What are you saying? What? Drums? Who are you? Hey, that's Papa Gene Ween, you fucker! Hey, man! Come on! Yeah!
Despite the onslaught of hecklers, Ween soldiered on, finishing out their 9-song set before swiftly packing up, much to the relief of a very vocal portion of the crowd. But Henry Rollins had seen Ween's set, and when he took to the stage, he had a message for the audience.
You know what? I was thinking, I was standing back by the bar watching Ween fucking kick out the hard jams, treating it like a fucking seminar. Oh, I see that we have a mixed reaction in the crowd. Now, There probably are a few of you who don't like Ween. My suggestion is that you start liking them now, so years from now, when you all are shelling out $25 each, gladly, to go see them at the Spectrum, you'll be able to say, oh yeah, man, I was kicking back in Trenton City Gardens about 8 months ago when they were small before their rocket to stardom. I remember I saw them kicking, You Fucked Up and Tick. Yeah, I remember. I bumped into one of those guys once. I mean, I touched Mickey Ween, I actually talked to him. And you see, there will always be detractors. There will always be someone to deny true genius.
To the people in the crowd that night, having just seen Ween perform songs like Papa Zit and Common while wearing outlandish costumes, Rollins' diatribe must have seemed sort of dubious. But over the next few years, Ween would prove themselves to be one of the most celebrated and innovative bands of the 90s and 2000s. And yes, they did get a drummer.
What? Drums?
After signing Ween in 1989, Twin Tone A&R rep Dave Ayers became the band's manager, and would remain so through at least 1994, despite the band changing labels twice during that time. If nothing else, Dave Ayers knew talent when he saw it. That year, Ween began to record their debut studio album. After much deliberation, Andrew Weiss was chosen to produce. For context, Weiss was the co-founder of Trenton indie label Bird of Prey, which had released 4 of Ween's cassettes. This partnership came after Dean hounded label head Jeff Rusnak, quote, every day until he invited Ween to his apartment. Besides Bird of Prey, Weiss served as the bassist of Regressive Aid, and later, in Rollins' band. The majority of the album's recording sessions took place in Andrew's living room on a 16-track, which must have seemed like quite the upgrade from the 4-track machines Ween were used to until that point. During the recording process, to back the usual guitar and vocals, Weiss contributed bass parts, while Diener played drums. The track list of this new album consisted of 26 songs, which were, according to Dean, a greatest hits of sorts for the band's formative years. Despite featuring re-recorded versions of many songs from their Bird of Prey cassettes, the album turned out to be less abstract than their previous efforts, with more of a focus on songwriting rather than texture, shall we say. After nearly a year of recording, Ween's first studio album was finished, and on November 16, 1990, GodWeenSatan, The Oneness, was released on cassette, CD, and vinyl.
How about that? All right, Chief. Enough.
According to Dean, the album was recorded and sequenced with the vinyl release in mind, and as a result, the original 1990 CD release was subpar, or as Diener so eloquently put it, totally f***ed. The band would revisit the album in 2001 with acclaimed producer Howie Weinberg to remaster the album for a CD re-release.
My name is Howie Weinberg. I am one of the top mastering engineers probably on the planet.
In addition to the remaster, 3 outtakes from the GodWeenSatan sessions were added to the track list, and the package was dubbed the 25th Anniversary Edition, despite only being a decade old. This is the version you'll find on modern streaming services. You might be wondering what the deal with the album's title is. What is GodWeenSatan the Oneness, and what does it have to do with licking the palm for guava, or a marble tulip juicy tree? For answers, we have to dig deeper.
The wind is whispering, and time is rolling by.
Ween introduced themselves to the world in a 1990 Twin Tone press release, a veritable manifesto. For the sake of history, I feel like I need to share this text in its entirety. This was, after all, the introduction for many people to the lore of Ween, and for lack of a better term, this was the 1990 version of History of Ween, the cassette years. Feel free to skip to the next chapter at any point. Ween plays gospel music. Ween is here to spread the word of their lord demon god Boognish. Boognish appeared first to Ween in 1984, when Dean and Gene were 14 years old. They, Dean and Jean, were not friends, and they shared little in common. Upon the first sighting, Boognish communicated to them what had to be done, and later that day, Ween recorded onto tape the holy picture that he had painted for the two boys. He has since appeared only twice, once to punish Jean for trying to leave the band. The other time, Ween will not discuss. Since the apparition first appeared, Ween have recorded, legitimately, over 1,000 songs, and they have not even yet begun to accomplish their task of spreading his name on their earth. Ween ate dinner with Harrison Ford once, and he thought they were dicks. God is sinless and humane, so is Satan, and Jean claims to hold the balance between the two. Ween still don't really like one another, and at times, one must really wonder why they're still together after all these years. When you witness the obvious dislike between the two, and ask them why they haven't split, Jean starts to cry, remembering what happened in his last moment of weakness. Diener is too stupid to quit. Many people don't know about Ween yet, but those who do are more loyal than any deadhead. GodWeenSatan the Oneness will make you question the duality of man. At moments you will be pleading to God for forgiveness, and at other times you will feel the need to suffer for your most holy Satan. Don't be confused, this strange phenomenon is the power of the Boognish taking control of your soul. You need not be scared. There's nothing wrong with these feelings. You are experiencing the common vision that brought Dean and Jean together and keeps them from breaking up. There's nothing you can do. You can put the CD on random play and the same tears of love and hate will fall from your eyes no matter what sequence the songs are in. In the event that it becomes too much for you, Ween has listed their address on the record so you can write for guidance. Don't bother the people at Twin Tone when your new road to self-discovery leaves you confused. Just follow your soul, and he will help you find the road. Whoa. GodWeenSatan begins with an early live fan favorite, You F***ed Up, a blistering punk assault on a girl who seems to have in some way wronged Jeaner. She also happens to be a Nazi. Songs like Tick, I'm in the Mood to Move, I Got's a Weasel, Fat Lenny, Cold and Wet, and Bumblebee are fun noise rock numbers that I love dearly, but I'm honestly not sure how to describe them, so I'll leave that for you to discover. I'm in the Mood is notable for featuring the first Verisped vocals on a Ween studio album, which quickly became a hallmark of the band's style. Verispeed is an analog recording technique used to alter pitch by changing the playback speed of a tape. In the 20th century, pop songs were often sped up to sound punchier, and doom metal was slowed down to sound doomier. Ween would often pitch up an instrumental, sing to it, then shift the whole thing back down to the original pitch, resulting in the deep, resonant vocals that can be heard on songs like Tried and True
I see the light in you.
and Ocean Man.
Soaking up the thirst of the land, Ocean Man.
This technique also works in reverse, as seen on songs like Don't Laugh, I Love You. It was an oddly sweet song in comparison with the tracklist so far, showcasing Jeaner's more sensitive side. Could this be the girl from the album opener? One can only speculate. Never Squeal and Up on the Hill introduced jazz and doo-wop into the album's genre repertoire. Up on the Hill also happens to be one of the few times Ween lyrically mentioned Boognish on a studio album. Wayne's Pet Youngin' is a blistering punk track, and another holdover from Ween's cassette releases. It also features a count-in of not 4, not 3, but 25. Other notable tracks include Nicole, a 9.5-minute dub track, El Camino, another live fan favorite, Nan, which features vocals from a beloved Jeaner character named Eddie Dingle, LMLYP, an epic Prince-inspired sex anthem, and Birthday Boy. Birthday Boy is the most earnest song on GodWeenSatan, and it's also an all-time fan favorite. The version on the album is heavily distorted, possibly an attempt at distracting the listener from the rawness of the lyrics.
This next song is, it's called, Birthday Boy, and I wrote it on my birthday. It's about this, girl that, I went out with for a while, and she moved to California. And I was really sad.
But live and stripped down, the song's true beauty is revealed.
I'll be around, I'll be in town. If you need a
After the final chorus, a voicemail from Jenner's aunt can be heard, wishing him a happy 20th birthday. It's a rare moment of vulnerability in the midst of an irony-laden debut, and must have been surprising for Ween fans in 1990. At the end of the track, you can also hear a sample of Pink Floyd's Echoes bleeding through. This cements a pattern of behavior for GodWeenSatan, with LMLYP interpolating Prince's Shockadelica and Alphabet Street, El Camino interpolating Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit, and Birthday Boy sampling Echoes, allegedly due to Ween reusing cassettes, much like taping over your daughter's ballet recital with the Powerball
Automatically
results.
a winner when you pick the Powerball tonight. It is number 24. 24.
In these early days, Ween played pretty fast and loose with copyright law, a habit stretching all the way back to Jenner putting the entirety of Kiss's Rock and Roll All Night at the end of a Synthetic Socks cassette. In an interview with CBC Radio during the Pure Guava era, Ween explained that they were kind of hoping someone would sue, just so that they knew the music industry had noticed them.
Actually, we were really hoping to get sued. That was the whole gist.
That was on the side, yeah. I wanted to get sued too.
Yeah, well, there's some note there about how Ween's in big trouble or something like that on the liner notes.
We were just trying to instigate the lawsuit. It never happened, though. He just ignored us.
But that's the great thing about GodWeenSatan. There's an anarchic quality to it, a certain metal-up-your-ass attitude. Just a couple of kids making the music they want, without any fear of fallout. And ultimately, I think that's the heart of Ween. On release, GodWeenSatan did about as well as you would expect. While no sales numbers are available online, I think it's safe to say the album didn't do hotcakes numbers. It did, however, more than satiate the small but ever-growing fan base. It was a huge step forward for the band in songwriting, performance quality, and production value. It also earned an illustrious B+ from Entertainment Weekly. Wait, David Brown? In December, Ween set out on their GodWeenSatan tour, which lasted 7 months over 3 legs. They started in familiar New Jersey, then flew to Europe for 11 shows in the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, England, and Hungary, before finally landing stateside in late February. These international shows were a strange experience for Ween.
We played in Budapest, and it was about the weirdest.
It was in like it was like
a wine cellar.
If you can imagine like a sewer cavern with like a cave over you, you know,
like
and
where
the speakers,
filmed,
right? And the speakers, every time the bass would go off in the speakers, the ceiling would start to chip. So you had all this like dust chipped, like the whole room was full of like Dracula-looking people in big Russian hats.
And they just didn't know what the hell was going on. We had our tape deck and we were
Budapest, I'll tell you, it was really intense.
England's a big toilet. Yeah, England just sucks.
No, England doesn't suck.
It does so suck.
No,
man.
England doesn't suck. England has...
Okay, tell me 3 good things about England.
Stonehenge...
And don't say beer, yeah.
Stonehenge, beer,
punk rock.
No.
Regardless of the quality of those shows, this was the start of Ween's presence internationally. Though overseas shows were a relative rare feat for the band in the early days, and certainly in the 2010s and beyond, the hallowed few were usually well attended and met with near religious enthusiasm. This appreciation only grew with the spread of the internet and access to the band's discography from anywhere in the world. Today, Ween is a worldwide phenomenon, even if phenomenon is written in lowercase. After getting their bearings back in the US, Ween set out once more, playing 14 shows across 6 states. Notably, one show saw Gene and Dean take the stage at CBGB in New York City, a legendary venue where artists like the Ramones, Blondie, Television, Patti Smith, Madonna, and Talking Heads got their start, among many others. Another show, which was for some reason billed as the Green-Lipped Muscle Show, saw Dave Drywitz fill in on bass duty.
Hey there, it's Dave Drywitz from Ween. I just bought this beautiful Rickenbacker from Music Store Live. Ben, Brandon, and Steve will take good care of you, so I highly recommend it.
That night, Diener discovered that Dave knew Claude Coleman from Skunk. Small world. Small world indeed. After the tour wrapped up, Ween headed back to their new digs, a dilapidated house on a horse farm outside of New Hope. This unlikeliest of places would become Ween's new home base. It was a living space, a recording studio, and a locale for all manner of drug-fueled debauchery. Its name was The Pod.
in another report from the underside of popular culture, let's take a look at just how strange things have been getting in the suburbs lately. Here's the story of a band you really should try to hear, Ween.
It was just purely accidental, everything, including this interview. It's all a big accident.
When Elektra Records signed to Ween in 1992, I'm sure there were some questions from the shareholders. After all, this was before the days of Tones and I gracing the label. This was the 20th century. God century. In the decades prior, Elektra had released albums from artists like AC/DC, The Eagles, MC5, The Doors, Carly Simon, The Cure, The Stooges, Queen. And now, Ween.
Dean's got to tune his guitar again. No, you have fun with F.
So how did this partnership come about? And more importantly, what would happen when the world at large was exposed to the power of brown?
It's Ween! We're Ween!
By the time their debut released in November of 1990, Ween's next album had already been recorded. In fact, 3 songs from GodWeenSatan had been recorded at the studio Ween called The Pod, those being Birthday Boy, Blackjack, and Puffy Cloud. According to Ween, The Pod was an apartment, though I'm not quite sure that term fits here. Andrew Weiss, Ween's long-suffering producer, dubbed it a shack, and I'd have to agree with that appraisal. Situated in the middle of a horse farm in Silbury Township, the pod was a haven for flies. Ween lived in the pod for a year and 10 months with their cat Mandy, who would later have a song dedicated to her. The band, working out of their new abode, recorded nearly 70 songs on a 4-track cassette recorder, much in the same way they had during their Bird of Prey days. The resulting demo tapes were entitled Big Timmy Wasserman, Bilboa, and the Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese on a Kaiser Bun. After sifting through the songs on these tapes, Dean, Gene, and Andrew Weiss took a vote on which tracks would appear on their next release, and eventually, an album took shape. Some notable outtakes from these demos include Good on the Bun, which would later be released on their Shinola Volume 1 compilation, and Albino Sunburn Girl, a live fan favorite. Word soon got around about Ween's prolific body of work, and in 1991, the band was courted by Mark Kramer. Kramer, after making a name for himself in the experimental New York music scene with Bongwater and Shockabilly, had founded indie record label Shimmy Disc, which had repped artists like Galaxy 500, Daniel Johnston, King Missile, and Guar. Kramer offered Ween $2,500, about $6,200 today, plus a trip with him to Jamaica. That was an offer Gene and Dean could not refuse. During the trip, Jeaner, Diener, and Kramer shot music videos for 3 songs from the upcoming album, Captain Fantasy, Pollo Asado, and Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese. They also, of course, indulged in the local herbiculture. On September 20th, 1991, The Pod was unleashed into the world. At a staggering 77 minutes over 23 tracks, The Pod was an impressive feat, considering the band had released an album with 26 tracks less than a year prior. Since no official contracts had been signed with Shimmy Disc, Ween weren't technically in violation of their multi-record deal with Twin Tone. Not that it would matter anyway, in a year's time.
The 2 guys have such a stage presence, even though they don't have 50 instruments, they got 2 instruments, a drum machine.
They're like the crazy boys next door. They're like your crazy cousins.
Tell me where you come from, was it?
The Pod marked a huge change in sonic direction for the band. After moving into the Pod, the band switched from live drums to utilizing the Alesis HR-16 drum machine, for fear of noise complaints from their neighbors on the farm. This shifted the tracks found on the Pod into a less bombastic, sludgier, and more insular sound. And when you go back and listen to those GodWeenSatan songs recorded at the Pod, you can hear their sound change right off the bat. In addition to being quieter and lower fidelity, the songs became notably druggier in nature. And although Gene later recanted the excerpt on the CD liner notes which claims Ween inhaled 5 cans of Scotchgard during the recording of the album, some substances were definitely at play. The album's cover art is lifted directly from the Best of Leonard Cohen compilation, only with Chris Williams' face pasted over Leonard's. Chris, or Mean Ween as denoted on the liner notes, was an old buddy of Ween's, present at the talent show performance from 1986. Williams also plays bass on Alone, the 19th track of the album. Strapped to Mean Ween's face on the cover is the Jammy Pack, a Scotchgard-powered bong, which perfectly exemplifies the imagery conjured by the pod's content. It's also the subject of the album's opening track. I couldn't dream of a better opener for the pod than Strap On That Jammy Pack. The track feels like a drunk bar band warming up at 3 a.m. as a sweaty crooner steps up to take the mic. It also acts as a litmus test for the listener. If you can't get down with Jammy Pack, the pod likely isn't for you. At least not right now. Next up is Dr. Rock, a flange-heavy punk anthem, and a song that would go on to be a staple of the band's live shows. Dr. Rock is the first time the pod really showcases Ween's knack for melody, if you can decipher it under all the Verisbed fuzz. Despite the album's lo-fi quality, the songwriting on display is actually quite good, and more earnest than one would assume. Like with Birthday Boy, it seems Ween were hesitant to broadcast their less irony-laden songs without a heavy layer of production distracting from the lyrics. The next track, Frank, introduces the pork roll, egg, and cheese motif found throughout the album.
Give me a pork roll, egg, and cheese.
The pork roll is a New Jersey staple, formulated in the 1800s by Trenton native John Taylor, and we no doubt saw pork roll as a point of local pride. Sorry Charlie and She F***s Me are sweet Diener ballads, the latter of which once again gives an extended shout out to pork roll. The pod is also notable for introducing the Stallion pentalogy of songs, with the Stallion parts 1 and 2 sprinkled throughout the track list. The Stallion was almost certainly inspired by the horses Ween would see galloping around the pod, and it seemed to be a theme that stuck with the band, as 3 more entries in the Stallion series would see releases down the line. The Stallion Part 2 sees a twist enter the narrative, when it's seemingly revealed that Diener himself is the titular Stallion. Pollo Asado is a sublime spoken word track that documents the exchange between a server at a Mexican restaurant and a very confused customer. The lyrics were inspired by Gene's real experiences working at Taco Loco in New Hope. Right to the Ways and the Rules of the World is a Bowie-infused fantasy epic. Captain Fantasy is a psych rock anthem concerning its titular mythical character. This style of fable about a legendary creature is a theme that would continue through the band's discography. Oh My Dear Falling in Love is a sweet twee-pop number which shows a rare sonic restraint from the band, and is another testament to Ween's burgeoning skill as songwriters. And of course, Pork Roll, Egg, and Cheese, which might be the most well-known track on the pod, and it's easy to see why. A gorgeous, earworm hook serves as a final send-off to the pork roll motif, and further showcases the pod's more melodic side. There are many more songs on the track list not mentioned here, but I'll leave those for you to discover as you listen, re-listen, and listen again. As an aside, in 2003, Ween recorded All Requests Live, an in-studio live album consisting of songs voted for by superfans online. And of the 16 tracks performed, 6 of the songs were from the pod, making it the album with the most individual requests by far. One possibility for why the pod is the favorite of so many fans is its re-listenability. Your first time experiencing the album, you might not get it. It's loud, atonal, crass, and totally insular, full of indecipherable inside jokes and odd structures. But as you revisit the album over and over again, you tap into the pod's wavelength more and more, until you and the pod are one. One day you'll wake up and realize you no longer need to strap on that jammy pack, because you never took it off. On release, the pod was praised by Spin Magazine, Kerrang!, The Stranger, and Trouser Press, and it's been cited by legendary electronic artist Aphex Twin as one of his favorite albums. However, once again, it definitely didn't break any sales records. In September, Ween embarked on a tour supporting the album, with Mark Kramer filling in on bass. The pod tour would see Ween play 44 gigs over 4 legs, and had them on the road until late June 1992. During the tour, Ween drove across the country to play in 16 states, and it also marked their return to Europe, with shows in the Netherlands, Belgium, and the UK. Over the tour, tensions brewed between Ween and Kramer, since he was technically their boss, and after the tour, the band broke ties with Shimmy Disc, though Diener would later state that there was no bad blood between the two.
No, Kramer's alright, man. Kramer's alright.
But were Twin Toners mad that you were stolen?
Kramer.
You were stolen by Kramer?
No, Twin Tone went out of business, so we had to do something.
Oh, okay.
And
wow, I'm
we
sorry.
had to put out another record, and this guy promised us a trip to Jamaica.
Well, I'm glad that you broke.
So what would you do, man? Go to Jamaica, right?
In October 1991, Ween had been evicted from the pod, though Dave Ayers reportedly said he was going to help Ween out. Before long, Ween had moved into a farmhouse with another Shimmy Disc alumni band called False Front. Dean and False Front vocalist Guy Heller were already familiar with each other from junior high and made an instant connection. The two began making music together in sessions that would eventually culminate in the formation of the hard rock band Moist Boys. But put a pin in that for now.
Okay, we're back, and our homemade media festival continues with a band called Ween that actually records on a portable 4-track system. This is Mickey Melchiondo and Aaron Freeman, both halves of Ween. They actually prefer to go by Dean and Gene Ween, and who am I to argue? Anyway, why do you guys...
In 1992, Ween's contract with Twin Tone was bought up by major label Elektra Records at the behest of A&R rep Steve Ralbowski. Elektra gave the band a ludicrous amount of creative freedom. Ween was paid $200,000 to produce a third studio album, and when the band delivered a lo-fi album consisting primarily of songs already written and recorded, there was no pushback from the label. To quote Ralbowski, the lo-fi thing was almost a mark of distinction. It gave Ween another measure of uniqueness, and it wasn't so lo-fi that it was an unpleasant listening experience. It harkened to what they did live, and I didn't give it much of a second thought. If there was any second thought, it was, sonically, this is cool that it's 4-track and lo-fi. It was basically, give them the resources to make the records the way they wanted to make them, support their agenda within the label, and try to come up with creative plans with my colleagues to support the releases. And just basically, get out of the way. Steve Ralbowski, the man you are.
Now, you guys were on Twin Tone, then you Shimmy Disced, then you Atlantic'd.
No,
man, we
Electra'd.
Oh, Electra'd. Oh, sorry.
The new album was once again produced by Andrew Weiss, and after all was said and done, Weiss stated that it only cost the band $100, with Dave Ayers going as low as $42. On November 10th, 1992, less than 2 years after Ween's debut, Pure Guava was released on Elektra Records. Pure Guava sees a slight shift in sound from the pod, though the two are definitely spiritually connected. For an analogy, I would liken the pod to Deliriance, whereas Pure Guava is more psychedelic in nature. Guava saw the same lineup of Gene, Dean, and Andrew recording onto 4-track tape, with a rotating roster of guest performers chipping in here and there. Mean Ween contributes vocals on album opener Little Birdie, Guy Heller from Moist Boys sings lead on Flies on My Dick, and friends of the band Larry Curtin and Scott Lowe also pitch in backup vocals throughout the album. This collaborative atmosphere is illustrated further in the album's liner notes, where a fold-out photo of Ween with a crowd of New Hope locals can be found. Some notable attendees include Gene with first wife Sarah, Dean posing next to Spinster Records owner Warren Green, and Claude Coleman Jr., the drummer from Skunk, who had started to jam with Ween around this time.
On your new record, on Pure Guava, when you opened it up, there's a picture of, looks like a homestead somewhere, and you've got about 40 people. It's very kind of Allman Brothers band circa 1970.
Yeah.
All these kind of hippie-type people, and one black guy with a scythe.
Yeah.
Coleman. What is all this? Who are these people?
They're just all our friends. We just got them all up there one day for a shoot.
It's a perfect snapshot of the all-American atmosphere that acted as a primordial soup for the band. Ween is no longer just Gene and Dean. Ween is Legion. Also in the liner notes is a message to fans reading, "When Ween comes to your town, bring us hot meals. No more junk food. Thanks." This harkens back to an earlier debacle. In the liner notes of GodWeenSatan, the band had asked show attendees to bring food, but were unimpressed with the menu served up to them. True art requires premium fuel.
It's just a joke. People would think it's just really lousy food. Whereas we were hoping to get like glazed roast ducks and things like that. The big bowls of rice pudding, but no one has come through.
Pure Guava begins with an unreal suite of songs. The first track, Little Birdie, is a psyched-out ballad about, what else? Bird watching. Next is Tender Situation, a heartfelt all-time fan favorite that, in my opinion, really comes alive on stage. The Stallion Part 3 is another entry in the Stallion series, and perhaps the greatest yet. The Stallion transcends to take on a mythical quality, now closer to prog rock epics than the sludgy noise rock from Parts 1 and 2. Big Jim is a vibrant pop number dedicated to Big Jim Lemons, a wise old man who worked at a car lot owned by Diener's dad. And Push the Little Daisies. Released as a single with a music video 7 months later, Push the Little Daisies was a runaway hit of Pure Guava. Daisies is a sunny Verisped pop number about a troubled relationship. One so troubled, it seems, that Jeaner wishes death on his lover. Push the Little Daisies was a minor radio hit, but really took off with the release of the music video, which was featured on Beavis and Butthead in June of 1993.
Hey Beavis, this guy sounds like you.
Shut up, fart knocker.
In the music video, Gene's cursing was censored by an excerpt from Prince's Alphabet Street, which I think you'll agree is much preferable to the standard 1000 Hertz bleep. After the success of Daisies, Ween were invited to appear on several TV shows and high-profile events, including MTV's 1993 Spring Break in 120 Minutes. Ween had never seen success of this caliber, and as such had a hard time adjusting to the new lifestyle. They had never had to censor themselves before, and they had certainly never had to hang out with Vince Neil. Pure Guava continues with a trilogy of down-tempo, hip-hop inspired tracks. The Goin' Gets Tough from the Get-Go, Reggae Junkie Jew, and I Play It Off Legit, which see Gene and Dean exchange bars over drum and bass loops. Reggae Junkie Jew in particular would prove to be a fan favorite. The song is a diss track of the local musician Brian Lansky, who allegedly stole Jeaner's girlfriend and was a general nuisance to all. Some critics took offense to the lyrics of Reggae Junkie Jew, not knowing, and possibly not caring, that Jeaner is Jewish. Once again, Ween had never had to curtail to the easily offended before, and they weren't planning on starting now. Pumpin' for the Man chronicles Diener's former work at a gas station where he would pass out early Ween cassettes, and the trials and tribulations of the working class. Sarah is a sweet spacey dream pop number. Spring Theme is a sultry R&B cut about lust. I Saw Jeaner Crying in His Sleep is a lullaby of sorts from Dean to Gene, and Morning Glory is a massive industrial noise track about pumpkins. It's a real shame that this gem has never been played live in full. Loving You Through It All is a country western ballad where Gene and Dean seem to be making up the lyrics as they go. Hey Fat Boy is a roided out assault on an overweight fellow who allegedly killed Gene's mother. A citation needed on that one. Then there's Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy, a legendary Bowie-esque number that ends with a blissful chorus of stereo a cappella. Finally, the album closes out with Poop Ship Destroyer, a sci-fi narrative which rides on the sonic coattails of tracks like I Play It Off Legit. Poop Ship is another live staple, and has occasionally been played for up to half an hour live, despite only being 2 minutes long on the record. Once again, there are more album tracks to experience, which I highly recommend you dive into. Pure Guava is a record best experienced as a whole. It's like Abbey Road or Pet Sounds, if Abbey Road and Pet Sounds had a song called Touch My Tutor on their track list.
Here's a song we haven't done in a while. Common Bitch by Ween.
This is about the common bitch.
Common bitch!
Considering how cheap Pure Guava was to produce, the album was a huge financial success. It not only widened Ween's influence, but also deepened the cult-like devotion of longtime followers. On October 29th, 1992, Ween set out on tour once again, and this one was a beast. Stretching over 7 legs with 75 shows, the Pure Guava tour lasted until May 1994. It also saw the band going the furthest from home yet, with leg 5 containing 11 dates in Australia. Oh, and they also had 2 gigs in Canada. The shows of the Pure Guava era not only saw Andrew Weiss joining as the band's live bassist, but by leg 4, Ween officially had a drummer.
Drums.
And it was none other than Claude Coleman.
Yeah, Coleman.
Ween. That's about it for this edition of The Week in Rock. We'll be back next week with an up-close look at gays in the military, the Black Crowes, the king and queen of the glamour scene, RuPaul, and Mick Jagger performing live. We'll see you then.
Throughout the tour, fans began to notice new songs being added to the set list. Songs with titles like Freedom of 76, Take Me Away, What Diener Was Talking About, and Voodoo Lady. These songs were a little different from the usual Ween fare. The instrumentation was tight, and the lyrics were markedly less irony-laden. The band stripped back the noise and let the songwriting speak for itself. This was baffling, to say the least. Though Steve Ralbovsky had told Ween they could continue making lo-fi brown music on Elektra, it seemed like they had a hunger for something more. Something sweet instead of sour. Something savory, even. As 1994 rolled around and the band hunkered down to finish their 4th studio album, it seemed that Gene and Dean were craving chocolate. And cheese.
Okay, but now you guys have a deal with Elektra, right? You have a record out on Elektra, and now that you're on Elektra, do you think that, are you going to do your next album the same way, or are you going to now like fly to the Bahamas and go in a big studio and do all that?
Now we're going to record the next album in Maui, 48-track studio.
Glad to hear it. Okay.
We want to get like Michael Bolton's backing band.
Good.
In 3 years, Ween had released 3 studio albums: GodWeenSatan, The Pod, and Pure Guava, each supplying listeners with their own twisted brand of noise rock goodness. Ween had seemingly settled into a niche, that of prolific lo-fi grab bag bands like Guided by Voices or Sebadoh. But as the years went by, Ween began to push boundaries. Songs like Demon Sweat from The Pod and Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy from Pure Guava showcased a newfound sincerity and technical prowess. And Ween's live gigs began to balloon in length, with the band introducing new compositions featuring sprawling solos and complex harmonies.
Totally progressive.
It seemed Ween was growing into something very different, while still keeping in the spirit of their old material. As 1994 rolled around, it seemed that Gene and Dean were finally maturing. Well, maybe maturing isn't quite the right word. Before I get into the history of Ween's boundary-pushing, genre-defying opus of a 4th album, I would be remiss if I didn't mention its Pat. Pat O'Neill Riley was an SNL character created by Julia Sweeney. The entire breadth and width of the joke is that nobody knows what gender Pat is.
I think you'd make a really great father role model.
But if you think that sounds like a one-off, you'd be dead wrong, because Pat had 12 sketches over 3 years at SNL. And that wasn't all, because in the age of Wayne's World, Touchstone Pictures, which is Disney by the way, decided Pat should get an entire movie. Despite direction from the legitimately talented Adam Bernstein, a great cast, and a pretty cool soundtrack, It's Pat is, in my estimation, unfortunately a dud. But Ween weren't merely on the soundtrack of It's Pat. They were in the movie.
Pat, aren't you?
Who wants to know?
Oh, we're Ween.
What's a ween?
We're a band, you know. That's Gene Ween and I'm Dean Ween, you know. Like Simon and Garfunkel, Peaches and Herb.
It's kind of sad you got stuck with that name.
Not only that, they're a plot point early on, and a Ween gig is the setting of the film's climax. I only mention It's Pat because, believe it or not, the movie was kind of a big deal in certain sectors, with even Quentin Tarantino contributing to the script at points. And I'm sure that for at least one person, It's Pat was their intro into the wonderful world of Ween. Before I dive into the recording of Ween's 4th album, I'd like to thank author Hank Steamer for his entry in the 33 1/3 series on Chocolate and Cheese. His access to first-hand accounts from the band is unparalleled, making it one of the best documented periods in Ween history, and this video would be impossible without his work. In 1993, Ween moved. After recording demos for the new album at Graphic Sound Studio outside of New Hope, Ween took their payment from Elektra and moved into an office space in Pennington, New Jersey. The office had formerly been a telemarketing operation, and it was still surrounded by 2 working businesses. On the left was a functioning dentist's office, to the right a Comcast studio, and in between them was Ween. Day and night, Ween would blast a wall of sound while recording, leading Gene to say, if we weren't the only ones occupying the space at the time, then we were soon to be. Adding to the sound was the return of live drums to the recording process, which had been absent since GodWeenSatan because of their neighbors at the pod. Claude Coleman, who had played gigs with them live, was brought in to record drums on what Ween dubbed the most important stuff. At risk of getting ahead of myself, a healthy amount of drum machine is still present on songs like Spinal Meningitis and Candy, but songs like Freedom of 76 showcase just how much space opens up when a real drummer gets behind the kit. In addition to live drums, the session saw a real bass player perform on the album, in the form of Andrew Weiss, Ween's longtime producer. Ween also brought in session musicians for various tracks, leading to Chocolate and Cheese being the band's biggest and most collaborative effort yet. It was also Ween's first time re-recording demos, rather than just putting the first version on the final album. That said, a few demos did make it onto the final project, if the performance was considered strong enough. Of the recording conditions, Claude remembers, it was just this large room, totally crammed with gear, haphazardly strewed about everywhere, and in the middle of it all was this gigantic console with Andrew Weiss behind it. It was just a real fun, real free way to make music. Andrew Weiss might have disagreed. These sessions marked the first time Ween recorded in a digital, albeit still physical format, that being ADAT, a VHS tape recording format. Andrew Weiss would control the recording and playback with a computer, long before the days of user-friendly DAWs. Because of the trailblazing nature of the hardware used, the recording process was plagued by a myriad of technical issues, which nearly caused Weiss to tear his hair out. In addition, Gene and Dean initially weren't happy with the sound they were getting, preferring the warm analog sound of tape to the new ADAT. After countless technical issues and annoying the neighbors with sound pollution and trashing up the building, a cloud of paranoia soon descended over the recording process. Dean recalls getting out of his car and running inside each day to avoid seeing anyone. But despite all the setbacks, not only did these sessions produce a respectable 16-song tracklist, but also a wealth of fully mixed outtakes, 11 of which would later be released on the album's 30th anniversary edition. On September 27, 1994, Elektra Records released Ween's fourth studio album, Chocolate and Cheese.
Freedom of the body.
For many people, the elephant in the room in regards to Chocolate and Cheese is the cover. Featuring a woman with the most cropped a top can be, it feels like Ween has taken the macho sex sells method of album promotion. So you might be surprised to learn that originally the person featured was going to be an overweight sailor. As always, it's one extreme or the other for Ween. Adorning the waist of the woman is a wrestling belt, embellished with the likeness of the Boognish. For many years after the photo shoot, Ween thought this one-of-a-kind prop was lost, but Dean eventually revealed that he had quietly bought it and is now, once again, the owner of a piece of history. The title is also an interesting choice. It came to the band when they were thinking about Europe's greatest exports, chocolate and cheese. The phrase also works to describe the album, which contains both sugary sweet and smooth songs, as well as carb-rich cheesy tracks of the usual Ween fare. But let's talk about the ingredients of this feast, starting with... Take Me Away is a trumpet sounding, hearkening in the reign of the new Ween. It's presented as a recording of a Doors-esque lounge act, complete with crowd walla and frequent thanks given to the audience. Take Me Away also showcases a new confidence in Jeaner's voice. Gone is the sniveling fake machoism of GodWeenSatan. These guys know that they're good. And on that note, Diener is tearing the guitar to shreds on this track, with probably his greatest solo yet. They've taken the training wheels off. God help us all. And if you were worried about the sonic about-face, the next track, Spinal Meningitis, harkens back to pure Guava, with Verisped vocals and a drum machine, but there's a darker bent to the comedy than usual. As the narrator, a child on death's door, sings to his mother, you can't help but empathize with him. This is no Eddie Dingle. Then there's Freedom of 76, a piece of blissful Philly soul sound. Jeaner soars in glorious falsetto as Diener, Claude, and Andrew lay down the goods. At the end of the day, it's a love letter to Philadelphia, even if it acknowledges the city's flaws. Freedom also had a music video directed by legendary filmmaker Spike Jonze. Overall, a good intro for the uninitiated. Speaking of music videos, next is I Can't Put My Finger on It. Maybe Ween's most iconic video sees Gene manning a Euro stand as he assaults the audience with questions. Meanwhile, Diener goes for a walk on the beach. It's a beautiful night for that, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would say that. I would say that.
The song itself is a catchy noise rock number with epic Mediterranean flair. It also has one of the best drops in a Ween song.
Yeah.
Can't put my finger on it.
That was Can't Put My Finger on It by Ween from our Chocolate and Cheese Triple Zinc album that just came out.
Great falafels that day, huh?
Yeah, no. That's a hell of a video. That's a video.
I'm just gonna keep giving the thumbs up the whole show here. Thumbs up.
Anyway.
A Tear for Eddie is a sprawling Diener instrumental dedicated to the late Funkadelic guitarist Eddie Hazel. Shades of Frank Zappa's Easter Hay are on full display. Roses Are Free is a demented psych pop number popularized by jam band Fish. Sonically, it brings to mind tracks like Don't Laugh I Love You, and is another reminder that Ween can still get brown. Baby Bitch is one of the demos that the band opted to fast-track to the album. A sequel of sorts to Birthday Boy, it acts to voice the bitterness you feel after the sadness of a heartbreak has faded away. and it might just be one of Jeaner's best compositions of all time. Mr. Would You Please Help My Pony is a fun but really dissonant number about a pony with a thick lung. It also houses one of Andrew's best bass lines. Next is Drifter in the Dark, a country western track done in such earnest that it's easy to see Ween's love for the genre. It seems an unlikely pairing, but Ween and country just makes sense, much like chocolate and cheese. Voodoo Lady is a funk rock banger with a haunting noise interlude for a solo. The song had a music video directed by Roman Coppola, which is probably my favorite of theirs. Voodoo Lady is also a track that's had a second life on stage, housing some of Diener's greatest solos of all time. Chopper Road is an easy-listening, almost yacht rock track, with another great Weiss bass line, and yet another unreal Diener solo. Then there's Candy, another song that feels like a Guava holdover, being without a doubt the brownest track on Chocolate and Cheese. The lead vocals come courtesy of Mean Ween, with occasional distorted backup vocals popping in here and there. These were recorded by Jeaner, who was locked in the trunk of a car while Diener did donuts in the icy parking lot outside the office park. That fact alone is enough to make this one of my favorite tracks on the album. Buenos Tardes Amigo is a sprawling western murder ballad, with a twist. It's by far the longest song on Chocolate and Cheese, but it more than earns its length with just how epic the narrative is. Then there's the HIV song, another demo, and another disease-based track. The HIV song is a demented piece of carnival music with a ludicrous hook that, somehow, someway, has become an all-time fan favorite. What Diener was talking about is maybe the sweetest cut off the album. Just a solid pop rock number with a memorable hook mirrored by the solo. It's short but powerful and feels like a warm hug every time. Finally, there's Don't Sh** Where You Eat, a come-down track and another acoustic song with country stylings. Man, they should really just make a whole album of those. One thing that was clear was that Chocolate and Cheese was more eclectic than ever. Their first 3 albums definitely featured a variety of styles, but they were all kind of under the umbrella of lo-fi. Now, in the new studio setting, we were able to more faithfully emulate the genres of each respective song, showcasing their vast assortment of influences like never before. In short, Chocolate and Cheese told the world that Ween was no longer in the business of fringe parody. They were good enough to stand alongside their peers as producers, performers, and as songwriters.
Buddha. 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 Buddha.
In June of 1994, well before the album released, Ween was already on the road supporting the album. The first 5 legs of the Chocolate and Cheese tour saw Gene and Dean joined by Weiss and Coleman, for the first time consistently touring as a full band. Leg 5 saw the band return to Europe, to disastrous results. In '97, Diener was quoted as saying, "Absolutely the worst tour that we've ever done. I think we've toured Europe 4 times, and America probably 7 or 8 times, but this was us at our lowest, most drunken, unhealthy state. We had a British tour manager. I probably shouldn't talk about him, he might see it. Our tour started off, we didn't sleep for 2 days, then we drove to Milan from London to play. We sat upright in the car and didn't sleep for 2 days straight, then the next day got into an accident in the mountains of northern Italy. He drove away, so we got busted when we got to the Swiss border, because they were waiting for us. Somehow, we ended up in Cologne. I heard when we got back there, we won an award for the worst interview ever in the history of Euro TV. Regardless of how the boys were feeling, European fans and new converts ate it up, and Ween's sphere of international influence only grew. For Leg 6, and maybe due in part to the trauma from Leg 5, Ween stripped it back to basics. Weiss stepped back from playing with the band for the foreseeable future, and Claude just plain needed a break. Gene and Dean performed as a twosome for 13 domestic shows, several of which found the Ween brothers opening for Foo Fighters as they promoted their debut album.
Foo Fighters. Foo Fighters. Ladies and gentlemen, Foo Fighters.
As the Chocolate and Cheese tour wrapped up, Ween had already recorded their next album. Though the few tracks from the new album that they teased live were all country, Chocolate and Cheese had a couple country-inspired songs. It was assumed that this was just one of the genres Ween would tackle in their next bout. But after the release of Chocolate and Cheese, Mark Sutherland of NME had given the album a mixed review, and his advice may well have penetrated the minds of Gene and Dean Ween. Of the album, he wrote, "More like a very odd compilation than a proper coherent album," and wondered why Ween don't just stop mucking around and record an entire album's worth of similar gems. As I'm sure you're well aware at this point, Ween was never one to shy away from a challenge.
Enough said, we'll be right back. See you in a second. Thank you very much. Great.
Since GodWeenSatan, Andrew Weiss had been a crucial driving force for Ween in both the recording process and during live performances. For lack of a better comparison, he had been like George Martin to the Beatles, bringing expertise and craftsmanship to Ween's chaotic creativity. But as Gene and Dean developed as performers and songwriters, they began to wonder if they could strike out on their own, like the Beatles had with Let It Be. They felt they needed to prove themselves as musicians without help from their big brother, and so they set out to do just that. It was now sink or swim for Ween. After showing so much growth on Chocolate and Cheese, it remained to be seen if the band would flourish in their new independence, or flounder without someone to rein them in. With that in mind, you'd be justified in thinking that Ween should play it safe, continuing to develop what had worked on Chocolate and Cheese to smooth out the transition. But Ween had never been one to follow sound advice, and in 1995, Gene and Dean decided to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, mount the stallion, and ride headfirst into uncertainty.
Oh, we're Ween.
What's a Ween?
We're a band, you know.
Out of nowhere, out of a total musical vacuum, out of total darkness, comes one ray of light. And it's fucking Ween.
During the Chocolate and Cheese era, Ween had found themselves gravitating towards the country genre. Aside from Drifter in the Dark, there were also two outtakes, Powder Blue and I'm Holding You, that the band was intent on finishing. Soon after, the band wrote Piss Up a Rope, and the idea of doing a full country album seemed more and more appealing. Gene and Dean were nervous to fully commit to doing a traditional Ween album without Weiss, so they decided to do a country album in Nashville with session musicians as an excuse to put some distance between them. After recording a demo tape of 11 country songs, done in the classic 4-track Ween fashion, friend of the band Ben Vaughn shopped it around to various session musicians in Nashville, some of which turned down the project based on the lyrical content of Piss Up a Rope and Mr. Richard Smoker. In the interim, we moved into a beach house in New Jersey to begin working on a different, nautically themed album. When they received word that the session musicians had been locked down, they traveled to Nashville to begin work, with Ben Vaughn handling production. The musicians Ween contracted to record the album were legends in their own right. On piano was Bobby Ogden, who had played with Kenny Rogers, Willie Nelson, Ray Charles, and had been a member of the Marshall Tucker Band for 5 years. Behind the steel guitar was Russ Hicks, who had played with Marty Robbins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Townes Van Zandt. On harmonica, bass, and really any instrument you can think of was Charlie McCoy, who had recorded solos on records by Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan, Elvis, Waylon Jennings, and Simon and Garfunkel. I could go on, but I think that gives you an idea of the pedigree of musicianship that Ween was working with. The band worked as one unit, effortlessly adapting to any changes Gene and Dean could throw at them. Of the recording, Dean wrote, "For this album, we wanted to see if it was possible to hire the great session players from the golden age of country music, and after a few phone calls, I realized that the 5th Ween album was going to have 3 guys named Buddy playing on it. We wrote these songs exclusively for this record, and we spent most of our time leading up to these sessions frightened that our band was going to kick her skinny northeastern asses. As it turns out, I don't think we phased these guys at all. So around November 1st, Gina and I jumped in my car and we drove to Nashville, where we spent 8 lovely nights at the Shoney's Inn, conveniently located next to the Country Music Hall of Fame. The rest of our time was spent laughing at each other, singing in a room of 50 to 60-year-old guys playing songs that we wrote. I think that in this time of crappy power country, our session was a lot of fun for everyone involved. The players on this record are the best that I've ever played with, and they nailed every one of these songs on the first and second takes.
Probably the first 10 minutes, I would say, was my highlight. Because we'd conceptualized about it and planned it, but we had no idea if it was going to work. We assumed that it would be great, you know. But the second they started playing the first song on the first day, it was like, we just started laughing.
Yeah, listening to the Jordanaires, too, is really funny.
Yeah.
Listening to the Jordanaires back us up, it's just hilarious. I mean, because these guys are, you know, it.
As a result, the backing tracks for the album were recorded in just 3 days. During the sessions, 1 song was added to the track list, while 3 were scrapped, leading to the album being only 10 tracks long. Despite considering naming the album November Nights, the band decided to go with 12 Golden Country Greats, mostly because it was funny.
Actually, the new album, the 12 Golden Country Greats, obviously 10 songs, okay. Pretty.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And then
you gotta flip the CD over.
Oh, okay. Damn.
You got arrow back after track 1.
I should have known. I should have known these things. Out of curiosity, I've noticed that like the albums prior to that were, you know, pretty much mixed with like either 4-track or 8-track. This album seems to be technically more advanced, I guess, than the other albums. Was that intentional, or was that just the way?
Yeah, it would have been kind of hard to drag those guys into like our living room to record on the 4-track.
Having the band meant that Gene and Dean were free to focus on the lyrics and vocals, while taking notes from Ben Vaughn on how to produce. In fact, Dean, the instrumental powerhouse of Ween, only recorded guitar on 1 song on the album, that being I Don't Want to Leave You on the Farm. Likewise, Gene only contributed guitar on Fluffy, technically making it the Ween album with the least, well, Ween on it.
People used to do it, you know, Dylan went down and made Blonde on Blonde, not to say that you know, but...
That's kind of crazy, too, because, like, it's like an all-star... Oh, yeah? What?
What? So I was just looking in the other camera.
It's a puppet show.
Okay.
You assembled like an all-star cast of country players. Well, why did they want to play with me?
Why?
Yeah.
Coughed up the cash.
Yeah, we had the cash. Totally.
12 Golden Country Greats begins with I'm Holding You, a sweet call and response tune, not dissimilar from Drifter in the Dark, but the added instrumentation really elevates this one into transcendental territory. The classical guitar solo, courtesy of Pete Wade, is played with such passion that I found myself falling in love with this album from the first song alone. Next is Japanese Cowboy, a more upbeat jig, which tells the story of a love that's too rare to be true. Gene's voice takes on the quality of a confident crooner as Russ Hicks tears the steel guitar to shreds. The third track on the album is perhaps the most controversial, Piss Up a Rope. The song is sung by Diener, and the title comes from an old adage that Dean's dad used to describe fruitless endeavors, but the title itself isn't really the source of the controversy. The lyrics to Piss Up a Rope are, taken at face value, pretty sexist, playing into the classic country trope of hating your nagging wife. But the verbal abuse goes so far as to push the track into parody, with the narrator obviously being a terrible person. As an aside, X-Files actor David Duchovny has gone on record as saying that Piss Up a Rope is his favorite Ween song, because it was introduced to him by his future wife, Téa Leoni. After becoming a Ween fan, Duchovny would recommend the band to 20th Century Fox, leading to Ween recording an original song for the X-Files movie soundtrack. Next is I Don't Want to Leave You on the Farm, a homesick song, written by Gene from the perspective of Claude on tour, who had been missing his girlfriend while on the road with Ween. Pretty Girl is a banjo-picking jig about a lopsided love triangle at a hoedown. It's a great song that's sure to get you dancing, but I've always preferred the live version where Gene's vocals are moved into a higher key. Powder Blue is one of the tracks that was carried over from the Chocolate and Cheese era. At the end of the track, after shouting out the session musicians on the album and giving them time to solo, the track transitions into a section featuring Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali. Everybody stop talking now, I tell you. I told you, all of my critics, I told you all that I was the greatest of all time. Sunday, listen. I told you today, I'm still the greatest of all time. Never again defeat me. Never again say that I'm going to be defeated. Never again make me the underdog until I'm about 50 years old. Then you might get me.
After not clearing the sample, Ween faced legal action on behalf of Ali's lawyers, causing Elektra to pull the album from shelves and replace the song with a version that ends abruptly after the introduction, making the original version a real rarity. Mr. Richard Smoker is another controversial track, being a jaunty, almost ragtime take on gay culture. It's another track that goes so far that it comes out the other side, clearly being a parody of homophobic stereotypes, and it's been adopted by Ween fans of all walks of life as a live favorite. Help Me Scrape the Mucus Off My Brain is another Diener track. It's a song about begging your wife to help you recover from a hangover and apologizing for being out so late. In its own way, it's a really sweet song, with another great classical guitar solo. Next is You Were the Fool, an epic folk ballad with a psychedelic bent. It's closer to the Grateful Dead than Conway Twitty, and feels like something you'd hear on later albums like White Pepper or Quebec, with reverb vocals and dissonant feedback in the final instrumental section. Finally, Fluffy, an ode to the simple life, with a dog by your side. Written entirely in short sentence fragments, like something out of a phonics book, the lyrics mimic the way you would actually talk to a dog. And of course, the song ends in a soaring guitar solo, courtesy of Gene. Despite only being 10 songs long, around half their usual output, 12 Golden Country Greats is truly all killer, no filler. By exploring a wide range of stylings within the genre, with a backing band full of industry legends, Ween had essentially created the perfect country album. If you had told that to Gene and Dean in 1990, I think they would have laughed in your face, before making a song about farting or whatever. It's amazing just how far we've come.
Yeah, you certainly did, I mean, completely, as far as a listener, to me, it's sort of a 180 and just went into a completely different direction than before. You know, when I was told, you know, or when I was asking one of the Elektra reps, I was like, is Ween coming out with a new album? They're like, yeah, it's a country album. And I kind of just went, cool. You know, I mean, it'd be kind of interesting. And then, you know, I listened to the album and it's completely a departure from what you usually do.
We didn't know we were making a record. I mean, to tell you the truth, we went down there we had a lot of the songs laying around that we knew we were going to put on our next record. And it got to the point where we had so many sort of country songs that we figured we'd go down there and do it just as a session.
Right.
And then, you know, we couldn't really shelve it. You know, it was too good for that, so.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. I mean, we couldn't not put it out. I see the record kind of like as a, you know, Beach Boys Christmas record or something. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
Just one of those albums.
Pretty cool, dude.
You couldn't ignore, huh?
Yeah, you got to put it out.
On release, 12 Golden Country Greats was met with mixed reactions. It was given sterling reviews by Pitchfork and Stephen Irwin of AllMusic, but middling reviews from Entertainment Weekly, Spin Magazine, and Rolling Stone, and a shocking 1 out of 10 by NME. Fans were equally confused by the album's announcement, but many quickly took to the album once they heard the songs. To promote the release, Ween decided to do what only Ween could do, and hand out 12 Golden Country Great themed Golden Country Beans to customers who bought the album at HMV. Despite being a fun diversion, which gave us some of their catchiest tunes of all time, 12 Golden had always been a stepping stone for Ween, a proving ground of sorts. Now confident that they could go it alone, Ween returned to the Jersey Shore to continue work on their next album. As the waves lapped at the beach, Gene and Dean found it within themselves to make something truly special. An album to outdo their entire catalog to that point. Cold blew the wind, and something was in the air. The next chapter of Ween history would bring new friends, new setbacks, new success, and lots of seafood.
Das sind wir, Andrew Weiss, unser Produzent sowie Bass- und Keyboardspieler, und Claude Coleman, unser Schlagzeuger. Beide haben auch auf der Platte mitgespielt.
Andrew Weiss entstammt dem Henry Rollins-Umfeld.
Andrew hatte als Kind einen kleinen Unfall.
By 1995, Ween had gone through many changes. They had grown from a duo to a four-piece. Then, with Dean and Gene traveling to Nashville after the unceremonious departure of Andrew Weiss, back to a twosome. The country album had been a fun experiment and a crash course for Ween in how to run a studio session. But while they were there, I'm sure they couldn't help but be more excited about the project they had started beforehand. In the weeks leading up to their Nashville residency, Gene and Dean had begun work on a new project, one more ambitious than anything they had ever made before. Sometimes you have to wonder if, in the cases of iconic timeless albums like Abbey Road, Purple Rain, Nevermind, Thriller, or Blue, if the musicians involved knew that they had a classic on their hands. Well, I can say beyond the shadow of a doubt that when Ween dropped the masters of their 6th album on the front desk of Elektra Records, yeah, I think they knew. Before I dive into the recording of Ween's 6th album, I'd like to thank author Drew Fortune for his article, Ween's the Mollusk Turns 20, an oral history by Mickey Melchiondo. This interview with Dean Ween himself is the best primary source for information about this era of Ween history, and this video would be impossible without it. As Gene and Dean hunkered down to begin work on their 6th outing, they were all too aware that this would be the first traditional Ween album without Andrew Weiss there for the recording. Gene and Dean took the equipment from Andrew's house that they had bought for the recording of Chocolate and Cheese, much to Andrew's annoyance, and moved into a beach house off the Jersey Shore to record the album themselves. There was only one problem. They didn't know how any of the gear worked. Thus began a process of trial and error, as Ween tried to figure out who they were in the studio when there was no Andrew Weiss or Charlie McCoy to fall back on. Despite having just written the country record, Ween committed to recording 5 days a week until the next album was done. They were gonna strike while the iron was hot. It was the off-season in the Jersey Shore, meaning Gene and Dean pretty much had the beach to themselves. After laying down a backing track, Dean would go fishing and Gene would wallow in his sorrow, as he was currently going through a pretty nasty breakup. Night 1 of the recording sessions would set the tone for the entire album. Jeaner had a songbook called A Bonny Bunch of Roses, which contained sheet music for a bunch of folk traditionals from the UK. Among them was Cold Blows the Wind, from which Ween set the lyrics to a new melody, one conjuring to mind images of dark, stormy seas. They hadn't initially set out to make a nautically themed record, but it seemed now that they had no other choice. Gene and Dean continued writing and recording until they had 3/4 of a record done, before venturing to Nashville in November to record the country record with their newly recruited orchestra of session musicians. After returning home in the winter, Dean decided to drop by the beach house. As he got out of his car, he almost couldn't believe what he saw. Water poured out of the house, cascading down the porch like a waterfall. The steps were coated in ice. As Dean precariously made his way up the steps, he stumbled into a horrifying scene. The entire beach house was flooded with frigid water. Dean ran outside to signal a cop who showed him how to shut off the water main, and Dean was finally able to track the source of the leak. While they had been in Nashville, the pipes under the sink had frozen and exploded, because, as it turns out, the house itself had no heat. While they had been recording in November, Dean and Gene hadn't noticed because the recording equipment running all day had kept the space almost uncomfortably hot. But when Ween left to record the country album, they had turned all the gear off, leading temperatures inside the beach house to plummet. The flooding had ruined much of Ween's gear and personal items, a devastating loss considering much of their advances from Elektra had gone towards financing it. In a panic, Dean looked for the master tapes of the album that had been recorded thus far, and like an answer to prayer, there they sat, unharmed on the kitchen table, above the waterline. The landlord, responsible for the mishap, showed little remorse, only worried about getting sued by Ween's representatives. The next morning, Ween brought a moving truck and enlisted New Hope locals to pack everything up before moving it into a rental house, without any idea of how much of it was salvageable. Upon playing back the master tapes, Dean and Gene were relieved to find that the moisture hadn't damaged them. Despite all the setbacks, they still had most of a record, and they were intent on finishing it. So Ween put their heads down and did some recording sessions at Claude's house and Jeaner's apartment. One night during the recording of the album, Dean was at a bar and met an unlikely friend, Glenn McClelland. Glenn was a classically trained jazz and blues pianist, and despite being from different worlds, the two quickly became friends. Dean invited Glenn to jam, resulting in the recording of 2 Ween songs, Boys Club, a future Shinola track, and Dancing in the Show Tonight, which would go on to become the opening track of the new album. After that, it was a lock. Glenn was in the band, and Ween were one step closer to achieving their final form. By 1996, Elektra had fired Steve Ralbowski, the A&R rep who had signed Ween, so the band had few friends at the label. As a result, Ween felt some real opposition to the release of 12 Golden Country Greats and the Mollusk. after mastering the album with Howie Weinberg.
My name is Howie Weinberg. I am one of the top mastering engineers probably on the planet.
They sent the tapes to the label, expecting a thunderous reception. Instead, after weeks of silence, Dean called in and discovered that their new A&R guy hadn't even listened to the album yet. After consulting with the Suits, Elektra suggested Mutilated Lips as a single, further suggesting that they had not actually listened to the album, because as great as that song is, it doesn't really scream hit single. So without any fanfare, on June 24th, 1997, Elektra released Ween's sixth studio album, The Mollusk.
Mutilated Lips from their album The Mollusk. Please welcome...
The Mollusk!
Oh, the Mollusk, right? Like the crab? Okay. Please welcome from New Hope, Pennsylvania, Ween.
One of the most iconic elements of The Mollusk is its album art, which was created by Storm Thorgerson, who had designed covers for 10cc, AC/DC, Alan Parsons, Bad Company, Black Sabbath, Electric Light Orchestra, Genesis, Led Zeppelin, Paul McCartney, Peter Gabriel, Phish, Pink Floyd, Sammy Hagar, Scorpions, Steve Miller Band, Styx, Syd Barrett, T-Rex, Wings, XTC, and would go on to do art for Audioslave, The Cranberries, Muse, and the Mars Volta. Phew. Thorgerson was originally going to be paid for his work, but after hearing the album, he was so excited about the project that he waived his fee, taking on the project pro bono. Not only that, Storm wanted to do every piece of art associated with the project, not just the cover. To create the album art, Storm went to an aquarium in his native England and sketched various sea creatures. He then hand-selected his favorite parts of the animals, like the head of a fish, the tentacles of an octopus, the claw of a crab, and the mouth of a mollusk, and combined them into a freakish chimera, which he felt represented the album's sound. Needless to say, the band loved it, and the cover was a lock. The Mollusk continued to be one of Thorgerson's favorite projects, despite his laundry list of accomplishments. After a gig in London, Ween finally met with Storm, who was both love-drunk and drunk, sprouting praise and planting kisses on the Ween brothers, saying, quote, "You guys are the band. You're the rightful heirs to Floyd and Zeppelin." High praise, indeed.
You're watching Wawa, live from New Hope, Pennsylvania, United States of America. I'm Dean Ween, one half of the rock band Ween. My lovely country home I purchased with my massive royalty checks from our last album. This is my good buddy Gene Ween over here. How you doing, buddy?
Doing okay.
Yeah.
What are you up to today?
Oh, nothing. Today's show is live from Germany,
Wow.
little town in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Why don't you tell them about the next video?
Oh, well, it's called Freedom of 76, and we did it in our hometown of Philadelphia that we love. And it's just a great old video, and really hope you enjoy it.
The Mollusk begins with I'm Dancing in the Show Tonight, a jaunty show tune, which is almost a one-for-one cover of 50s novelty song Are My Ears On Straight. The song features trippy vocals that transition from Jeaner's low and high voice, as well as Glenn's 2-year-old son, Charlie. It's a weird way to start the album, for sure. The first 3 songs on the Mollusk have a childlike quality that totally evaporates by the time we get to the Blarney Stone, and it's gonna be alright. But it's easy to see how this album would go on to inspire a certain children's show in 2 years' time. As an aside, Dancing in the Show was actually featured in the Addams Family 2 animated movie. And yes, it is actually a cover of the Ween version, not the original song. I can almost guarantee that somebody on that crew has a Boognish tattoo. Next is the title track, The Mollusk, the first track written exclusively for the album. Dean laid down an instrumental demo, including the now iconic synth part, then went fishing. When he returned, he found that Gene had written and recorded vocals. When Dean heard it all together, he was over the moon, declaring that it was the puzzle piece that was going to pull the whole album together. The Mollusk quickly became not only a fan favorite, but also a band favorite, being played more often than not at live shows. It's hard to describe the amount of hype that erupts from the crowd when Glenn plays those opening synth notes.
Of your latest Elektra release, which is called The Mollusk. Why don't you why The Mollusk? Let's just go there.
Best song on the record. We had no other ideas.
It is a good song.
The third track is Polka Dot Tale, another sing-song, nursery rhyme-esque track, which details the fantastical, unbelievable sights, like a whale with a polka dot tail, a dog that flies, and a guy with a birth defect. It also features an absolutely shredding solo, courtesy of Bill Fowler, a friend of the band. I'll Be Your Johnny on the Spot is an electro-punk track with an all-timer Diener solo. The song's signature guitar tone was achieved with a ring modulator that broke after recording the track. All good things must come to an end, but for 2 minutes, you too can experience pure guitar heaven on Earth. Next is Mutilated Lips, a trippy psych folk number written almost entirely by Diener. To achieve the intimate muted sound of the percussion track, Claude played the kit with his hands, something that he still does live. The solo section of the song is one of my favorite moments of psychedelic bliss in the entire Ween catalog, as Diener makes his guitar gently weep over Glenn's theremin-esque synth line. At release, Mutilated Lips was the only single for the album, a frankly baffling choice, but one that would be quickly remedied. It's Gonna Be Alright is a beautiful, melancholic ballad about trying to get perspective during a breakup, written about the actual breakup Diener was currently going through during the recording of the Mollusk. It also inspired one of my favorite Ween anecdotes of all time. I'll quote Dean directly. Aaron was going through a breakup. Oh, here's a great story. The night we did that song, we were down at the shore for our 5-day trip, and he was going through this breakup back home. His heart just wasn't in it. The song came about during that 5-day stay. I could see he was hurting really bad, and I said, I know you're hurting, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna drive to Atlantic City, which is about an hour from the end of the island. We're each gonna put in $500 cash. We're gonna walk in the sands and put it all in black on roulette. If we win, we're gonna go to the nicest f***ing steakhouse, like Ruth's Chris or Morton's. If we lose, we're gonna f***ing go see Toy Story. And we hit! We got the cash. We ordered Dom 64, lobster, and like 10 orders, just like in the Blues Brothers. Everything we wanted to taste, even if it was $100, we ordered. That's the great story of that song. Steak, pork chops, you name it. The Blarney Stone is an Irish drinking song from the perspective of a lecherous, gangrenous sailor. According to Guy from Moist Boys, the song is actually written from the point of view of a mutual friend, tattoo artist Joe Rose, who also had a Moist Boy song written about him. The backing vocals on the hook were recorded by a sea of drunk partygoers on a 4-track. According to Dean, they did 10 takes, and boy would I love to be a fly on the wall for that. Next is The Golden Eel, an epic arena anthem. Gene's roommate at his apartment had an aquarium with a golden eel in it, and one day Gene sat mesmerized watching it, inspiring him to write a song about the eel's unknowable wisdom. According to Dean, the fact that we were on shrooms or liquid kinda goes without saying. Cold Blows the Wind tells the morbid tale of a love lingering after death. It was adapted from that songbook, A Bonny Bunch of Roses, but of course, given the full, creepy, nautical Ween treatment.
I just wanted to ask, how do you guys get your inspiration for your songwriting?
You know, I was just about to ask them that same question, but in interviewing school, they said never ask that question. Go ahead. How do you guys get inspired?
Well, we listen to other songs and steal them. Basically. Change the words a little bit.
Milton Berle's punk rock set. Okay, cool. All right, where's that other call, Lee? Never mind.
That synthesized string interlude is another one of my favorite instrumental moments in the entirety of Ween's catalog. Pink Eye on My Leg is a funky, very 90s instrumental track. It kind of feels like something out of Earthbound or Earthworm Jim. It also appears to be an adaptation of album outtake Kim Smoltz, which is one of the most legendary and well-known Ween rarities.
We're holding out on the box set until somebody offers us like $5,000, in which case we'll bust back into these tapes, which are probably all demagnetized and deteriorated. Yeah. Then we'll pick all the wrong songs and put it out.
Tons of stuff.
Sell it for $16.99 when we're old and poor.
Now, I'm not saying Kim Smoltz should have been on the album instead. I'm saying, why not both?
They're mostly unlabeled, actually. I think I made a sorry-ass attempt at one time to go through these and label them. I did it for about a day. It was excruciating because the music was mostly so terrible, but far as you know, it's all great. It's all classic stuff.
There's a reason why we left these songs off the records.
Waving My Dick in the Wind was a holdover from the 12 Golden Country Greats era. The song details the life of a trucker on the road, trying to get back to his love while hotly pursued by the fuzz. It then shifts to wax poetic about the dancing skills of one Jimmy Wilson, portrayed live by Claude Coleman. According to Dean, Gene was improvising the lyrics to the song while recording, leading to an extended laughing fit from Dean after the "you're a real good dancer" ad-lib. Waving My Dick is the essence of pure freewheeling fun, and has easily become one of the band's most iconic and well-loved songs. Buckingham Green is an epic prog rocker, and perhaps the oldest composition on the album, dating back to 1992 during the Pure Guava sessions. An early version of the track can be heard on the Cat's Cradle Live album, and the song had come a long way since then. Buckingham Green is an epic, earth-shaking anthem with, for my money, Diener's greatest solo of all time. Gene's vocals take on a boisterous, unearthly quality, like an oracle revealing a prophecy, which is why I find it pretty funny that the song was partly inspired by a strip mall in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. Never has a more epic song been written about a place housing Empire cigars, Massage Quest, and a UPS store. Next is undoubtedly the most well-known track on this album, and by Ween at large, Ocean Man, which was released as a single in October, over 3 months after the album's release, due to rabid fan reception. The song found a wider audience in 2004 when it was used in both a Honda Civic commercial, and, more importantly, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, ingraining it in meme culture until the end of time.
Are you crazy? I was just gonna tell you that your fire's down. Manager, this is the greatest day of my life!
Written in no small part because Gene was in love with his mandolin, but had yet to find any use for it, Ocean Man is one of the catchiest pop rock anthems of the 90s, and it deserves all the attention it's gotten, and more. With how iconic Ocean Man is, it's hard not to feel like the entire album is building to this one song. Finally, there's She Wanted to Leave, another psych folk track that tells the tale of discovering that your love never really loved you back. After the narrator's wife is captured by pirates, he goes after them, guns blazing, only to find that she's now happier in her new life. Ending with one of the most devastating lyrics in the Ween discography, She Wanted to Leave is the perfect way to end a perfect album. But as the song fades out, we get one more surprise. A sparse, melancholic version of Dancing in the Show Tonight, tying everything back to the start, and reminding us that all this will end and begin again. While 12 Golden had contained songs with different vibes, all under the wider country genre, the Mollusk was comprised of songs with different genres, all under the nautical vibe. It felt like Ween finally reaching their full potential, merging the fun-loving attitude of GodWeenSatan, the darkness of the pod, the psychedelia of Pure Guava, the diversity of Chocolate and Cheese, and the instrumental and production mastery of 12 Golden Country Greats. In short, the Mollusk was a triumph, through and through. After recording the album by themselves, proving to themselves that they could go it alone, Dean and Gene knew that an apology was in order. To quote Dean, "We've got this finished record that we feel is our masterpiece. So what do? We go back to Andrew Weiss, who hates us not an inch less than he did when we left. He hears the record, and he knows it's our best record, and we did it without him. We asked him to mix it, and if our relationship was bad before that, it took 4 years to come to peace. He was mixing it with hate, but he did such a great job. He added so many great effects on that record, and when we got it back, filled with hate, we all knew it was the best record we had ever done. In time, our relationship repaired itself. Andrew Weiss took it from great and transformed it into our masterpiece. There's no second place for me. I like Chocolate and Cheese, but the Mollusk is by far and away my favorite." At release, the Mollusk was eaten up by fans, but got a mixed reception from critics. At the time, it was seen by many as just another Ween record, a goofy mishmash of genre parodies made for stoners. Dean recalls being especially hurt by an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer that gave the album 1.5 stars. However, as time went on, many publications began to reevaluate the album, with Consequence of Sound, Newsweek, Impose, and Stereogum all including it on best of lists. Pitchfork, to their credit, although often maligned as giving harsh ratings, gave the Mollusk a 9.7 out of 10 on release, meaning that they're alright in my book. For the record, they've also given Chocolate and Cheese a 9, White Pepper an 8, and GodWeenSatan a baffling 9.6 out of 10. If nothing else, Pitchfork is down with the brown. In April of 1997, 2 months before the album's release, Ween set out on the Mollusk tour, which would last 6 legs over 14 months. Once again, the band would not only play across the continental US, but also New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Hawaii, England, the Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, Austria, Switzerland, France, and Belgium, making it the biggest tour they had played to date.
We're out for 6 weeks right now, and then we go home for 2, and then we go to Europe for a month, and then we come home for Christmas, and then we go back on tour again in January and February, and probably March too. After that, I don't know. So that's it.
Right, do you guys like
After that, I'm gonna kill myself, I think. Too much touring, yeah.
The Mollusk tour would not only see Glenn McClellan join as a full-time band member, but also friend of the band, Dave Drywitz, who joined as Ween's permanent bass player.
Hey there, it's Dave Drywitz from Ween. I just bought this beautiful Rickenbacker from Music Store Live. Ben, Brandon, and Steve will take good care of you, so I highly recommend it.
Ween had finally reached its final form. Gene on vocals and guitar, Dean on guitar and vocals, Claude on drums, Glenn on keys, and Dave on bass, with Andrew Weiss handling production on the studio side. It was the beginning of a new era. Despite the songwriting and production mastery of songs like The Golden Eel, Ocean Man, She Wanted to Leave, and Buckingham Green, the silliness of tracks like The Blarney Stone and Waving My Dick in the Wind were still a hang-up for critics and listeners alike. Add to that the fact that Gene and Dean were disappointed by the lack of support from Elektra, believing the label saw them as nothing more than a novelty act, and you can begin to see where Ween's head was at going into their next studio album. It would prove to be a departure in many ways, and a dividing line for many fans at the time, but also an introduction for many new listeners. As Ween began to compose their next record, they realized it was time to get real. It was time to sit down and tell their fans, even if you don't come with us, this is exactly where we're at.
The band Ween, what can be said about them other than they're geniuses, they're funny guys. Listen to a Ween record, you'll be confused. Hopefully you'll laugh a little bit. We had the pleasure of touring with them in Australia, I believe, at the Alternative Festival, Alternative Nation Festival, which all I remember about that is hanging out with Ween and mud, lots of mud. And these are real funny guys.
In 1998, Ween were a band on the precipice. They had been on the verge of a mainstream breakthrough with songs like Push the Little Daisies, then Ocean Man, but had never fully broken through. The Mollusk had been a crossroads of sorts. Half the album harkened back to their fun-loving Brown era, with tracks like The Blarney Stone and Waving My Dick in the Wind, and the other half had demonstrated a pull towards mature sincerity, with tracks like It's Gonna Be Alright and Cold Blows the Wind. They had also begun to feel serious pushback from the representatives at Elektra Records. The old guard that had signed Ween had long since changed, and releases like 12 Golden Country Greats had only worked to confuse the higher-ups as to Ween's place on the label. So as Ween began to work on their 7th studio album, they felt a serious pressure to deliver. Ween had the potential for greatness. All they had to do was reach out and pluck it from the bush. Writing sessions for the new album began in the previously flooded beach house on the Jersey Shore from the Mollusk era. Despite wanting Todd Rundgren to produce, the band eventually settled on Chris Shaw, a legendary producer in his own right, who had cut tracks by Bob Dylan, Public Enemy, Bad Brains, Weezer, A Tribe Called Quest, Leonard Cohen, Wilco, Lou Reed, and Jeff Buckley. Shaw would also suggest the eventual title of the album, a portmanteau of Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album. White Pepper would be the first album to feature all 5 modern band members, Gene, Dean, Claude, Glenn, and Dave. For the first time, Ween's album recording process actually resembled that of a normal band, rather than the frantic tape deck overdub chaos typical of a Ween studio session. During the recording, the boys all lived together in a farmhouse in Woodstock, New York, commuting into Bearsville Studio to lay down tracks. By all accounts, the recording went smoothly. It was Claude's favorite album to record, feeling that the material perfectly suited his drumming style. Diener has stated several times that he loves the album's accessibility, something that might surprise anyone who's ever listened to Moist Boys. On May 2nd of 2000, Elektra Records released Ween's final major label album, White Pepper. After going through several proposed designs for the album, the cover art Ween eventually settled on was an illustration by John Weiss, who had filled in on drums for the on-screen version of Ween in the classic, critically acclaimed film, It's Pat, the movie.
Yeah, anyway, we're doing a gig tonight. We were wondering if you wanted to come out and play.
Great! I'm in a band! I hopped aboard that bus knowing that I was on the road to fame and fortune.
The album begins with exactly where I'm at, a sonic cold plunge into Ween's all-new velvety studio sound. It also heralds Ween's shocking turn into newfound lyrical sincerity and straight-ahead songwriting. The song feels like one long verse, all building to a mind-blowing solo that says, Ween is back, and this time, we're here to top the charts. In many ways, it's a perfect start to White Pepper, and is in my book, one of the greatest album openers of all time. Next is Flutes of Chi, which is by far the oldest composition on White Pepper, dating back to 1993 during the Pure Guava era. According to Diener, Flutes of Chi was the song we've recorded more than any other Ween song ever. Versions of the song were recorded for both Chocolate and Cheese and the Mollusk, with the latter getting pretty far into the process. The band began to feel burnt out after recording the song 5 times for the Mollusk, before ultimately giving up and releasing it on Ween.com on August 12, 1998. But after being well received, Ween decided to overdub one of the Mollusk recordings and included the song on White Pepper. Even if you don't, the first single from White Pepper is a blissful work of piano power pop. Prior to the album's release, the song was previewed for radio station employees who loved the song before it was revealed who had written it. According to Gene, nobody knew who the band was until the end, and then they revealed it was Ween. Everybody freaked out and said, don't we have some kind of image problem here? Everybody was really bummed that it was us, but they liked it anyway. The song was also one of the hallowed few to have a music video produced for it, which was directed by South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Next is Bananas and Blow, a concept that had been brewing since the recording of The Mollusk. In October of 1997, Dean told Earwig, we want to go to Havana, Cuba, and we want to call the record Bananas and Blow. We just want to live on bananas and cocaine for a month while we make our record. And all of side 4 is going to be Bananas and Blow, like the one song is going to be 25 minutes. The track eventually ended up being just 3.5 minutes, but is an achievement all the same, with the catchy Jimmy Buffett-esque songwriting propped up by lush tropical production, and capped off with an outstanding solo, courtesy of Dean. Bananas and Blow also features backup vocals in the chorus from Venice Thomas and Angela Clemens, who also feature an album outtake and Chris Harford composition, Does It Turn You On? In an interview with CMJ, Gene explained, we've always been talking about selling out like that. The backing vocalist was it for us. We've always talked since we were 14 that when we get the backup singers in, then we will have truly sold out. Stroker Ace is a blistering proto-thrash track dedicated to NASCAR driver Dick Trickle. Often performed live with Geener manning a megaphone, it's undoubtedly one of Ween's heaviest compositions, rivaled only by a certain song from their next album. Next is Ice Castles, a dungeon synth instrumental, which originally, you might be surprised to find out, was written for the ukulele. After going through many aliases such as The Baroque Jam and Anal Plump Fairies, it was eventually titled Ice Castles, after the Donald Rye movie. Back to Basem is an epic, bombastic piece of psych prog, and an absolute album highlight. It was named for the small, sleepy town of Basem in West New York, and reads like a yearning for a return to the simple life. Next is The Grobe, a sludgy stoner rock anthem which is, according to Gene, about cooking rice and heroin, and it's another taste of just how heavy Ween can get. Pandy Fackler is a smooth yacht rock track about a prostitute from Jersey who loves to dance. It's one of the rare tracks sung entirely by Dean, although Gene takes over vocal duties live due to the difficulty of the guitar part. The band often busts out the song live as an excuse for Glenn to solo for extended periods, during which time the other band members will take a bathroom break. Next is Stay Forever, which was actually written for the Mollusk before eventually being left off the album. The song, allegedly written about Gene's ex-situationship with Tanya Hayden, is possibly the most accessible Ween song by both production and songwriting metrics. Stay Forever is equal parts sincere and polished. It screams top 10 pop rock hit, which is why it's so unfortunate that it was only given a limited release as a single in the UK through Mushroom Records. Falling Out is yet another radio-friendly pop rock anthem, this time with more of a country western twist. The lyrics, which concern both romantic and platonic personal betrayals, seem to get more specific in the second verse, suggesting animosity between Gene and some of the band's hangers-on. It almost feels like the band is tired of being on a big label because of all the expectations that come with it. Maybe it was time for a change. Finally, there's She's Your Baby, which might be Ween's softest and most syrupy sweet song ever, contested only by Lullaby from La Cucaracha. The pillowy performance and production mastery of White Pepper reaches an apex on this track, with both Dean and Claude calling it some of their best work ever on a Ween record. And I'm inclined to agree. It's the perfect way to end this gorgeous, expansive, intimate album. It feels like the end of an era, the end of Ween's big-time major label adventure, but perhaps the start of a new one.
New Hope is the town in Pennsylvania where we grew up. We still live there. It's a big gay town. Yeah, I think it's got the largest gay population per capita of any town in America outside of like San Francisco, something like that. Really nice. Yeah. It's where we were born and raised.
The White Pepper Tour would see Ween on the road for 5 legs over a year, leading directly into their GodWeenSatan anniversary tour. It would be Ween's biggest outing yet, hot off the success of the Mollusk, and now with a full band in tow, Ween really seemed to come into their own on the road. That's not to suggest that there were no problems during the tour, as there were many. These accounts, sourced directly from Dean Ween's year 2000 tour diaries, paint a picture of just some of the hijinks the band got into. On the way to Reading, in August of 2000, the band hit its first real hiccup. After violently dismantling the bus's CD player, allegedly breaking the back taillight cover, and, more importantly, all manner of unspecified drug-fueled debauchery, their bus driver stopped the bus on the side of the road, called the police, and quit, leaving them high and dry. They were eventually able to get a new bus, but it couldn't tow the trailer, meaning they had to ride with hundreds of pounds of gear in their laps. Then that bus broke down too, 10 miles outside of Reading. In Austria, the band were pelted with beer, which Diener initially mistook for urine. Not exactly the warmest welcome. The next June, when touring the US, Diener had a throat infection when getting on the plane, which led to him getting an ear infection, which made the gig in Kansas City sound like it was underwater to Dean on stage. Quote, great gig, though. In San Francisco, Ween's roadie, Mick Preston, saved a child from drowning in the hotel pool, which was, quote, pretty heroic stuff for a dirty douchebag like Mick. On July 2nd, the band played an Alice Cooper-themed sports bar. I'm not sure how that happened, but I'm left to wonder what the Cooper crowd thought of Poop Ship Destroyer. A week later, Ween would play 2 nights at Stubbs in Austin, leading Dean to say, if we ever make another live record, it will almost definitely be recorded at Stubbs. There are quite a few entries which really need to be read in Diener's prose rather than vaguely summarized. Entries like, Pukkelpop, Belgium, nice festival, too bad we sucked. I'm into the word Pukkelpop though. 5 Points South Music Hall, Birmingham. Blame New Orleans, blame me, I don't know. We got pretty drunk on tequila before ever playing a note. I think we probably sucked, but I'm not sure. Cow House, Tallahassee. Shit House. The Chili Pepper, Fort Lauderdale. Aaron got too drunk to walk, but somehow managed to channel it all into something gloriously horrible for our concert. I'd apologize for the 50-minute Poop Ship Destroyer, but somehow I think you deserve it for living in Fort Lauderdale. I highly recommend reading the entire article on Monster Fresh if you want unprecedented amounts of access into the bewildering, often nightmarish touring conditions for Ween. But I think it's safe to say that this tour was, at the very least, memorable, and that has to count for something.
There's a really popular band in America called Fish, and they're probably popular here to a certain extent, but they kind of soaked up the whole Grateful Dead crowd after Jerry Garcia died, and they play some of our tunes. So the last couple of years, we've started seeing these like nomad hippies following us around just on that alone, you know. It's kind of funny to us, stinky hippies.
The album itself was generally warmly received, with a few caveats. Though Entertainment Weekly gave it a B, and NME gave it a 5 out of 10, Pitchfork gave it an 8 out of 10, and Stephen Irwin of AllMusic, Uncut, and The Guardian all gave the album 4 stars. Despite general praise for the newfound maturity of the band from critics, many fans initially took it as a bridge too far from their previous work. Sure, Chocolate and Cheese and the Mollusk had featured moments of sincerity, but White Pepper was almost entirely heart, with very little brown, at least on a surface level. However, as time went on, many fans began to reevaluate the album, especially after cuts off Quebec like Hey There Fancy Pants and The Fuck Jam proved that Ween still had a sense of humor. Nate Rogers for Stereo Gum put this best when he wrote, "It's much easier to appreciate White Pepper now that we know it didn't lead to a final form in which Ween were just edgeless and overglossed. The band never gave in to the powers that be. They never stopped being artists who deferred to the playful will of their mighty demon god Boognish, while also writing frequently, if not perpetually, fantastic music." In 2000, Ween was dropped from Elektra Records. Despite being the label that had taken such a big risk in taking on the band, the staff at Elektra had changed so much that they were unrecognizable from just 8 years before, meaning there was no love lost between the two. Regardless, Ween remained appreciative for the opportunity.
That's kind of middle of the road with record sales. You know, we sell like 100,000 records. Should be a lot of records, but in this day and age, it's not. And we got dropped from Elektra. And we were on Elektra since 92. The guy who signed us to Elektra wasn't at the label after 94. Turnover every 6 months, it seems. There's a lot of freedom in where we're at right now. All the hard work has been done for Ween by Elektra Records, to their credit. They put us in a spot now where we can use the web to our advantage.
In 2001, Ween would form their own indie label, Choco Dog Records, and despite the technical step down in prominence, they were excited to get back to being their own boss. When it came time to begin work on their next album, they realized they had amassed a crop of new songs that were so good that they felt obliged to do them right. Not only would this be their first indie record in a decade, it would consist of compositions rivaling the Mollusk in quality. And in order to bring them to life on record, they needed a producer that spoke their language. In 2001, as Gene and Dean picked up the phone, they knew just who to call. The question was, would he answer?
What advice would you give to like young musicians who want to like get where you guys are?
What's the expression to let the dream die?
Work hard. Work as hard as you can. Follow your dream.
Let the dream die.
Let the dream die.
Go to college. Your band sucks. Your demo sucks. Everybody knows it but you and your friends. And they won't tell you.
After being dropped by major label Elektra Records following the release of White Pepper, from an outside perspective, Ween's future seemed to be in jeopardy. But the band weren't concerned. They had begun talks with indie label Sanctuary and had a new crop of songs that they felt were as strong as those on the Mollusk. They also had a smoking gun. Andrew Weiss, former longtime producer and mentor of the band, had agreed to come back on board to produce their next album. The future was looking bright. But then, as it so often does, tragedy struck. On August 7th, 2002, the band received a call. Claude was in critical condition after a horrifying car crash on Route 78 in New Jersey. 3 years later, Claude would write a piece describing the event for the Denver Post. I'll let him explain. My last conscious memory before my life and body were altered forever was eating a slice of pizza in Hoboken, New Jersey. As I ate, I kept a watchful eye on my car, which was parked at an expired meter and vulnerable to another parking ticket I didn't need. I awoke several days later with family and friends surrounding me and in intensive care at a hospital in Newark. My body shattered, my mind in a state of severe trauma and disorientation. The left side of my body screamed with searing hot and immobilizing pain. The left side of my face drooped. My speech was slurred, my jaw rigid. The room spun endlessly. The vertigo and dizziness wouldn't stop. By accounts given to police, I was traveling westward toward my rural home when traffic stopped suddenly. I pulled to the left, and an 18-wheeler that was riding my tail at unstoppable speed did the same and rear-ended my car, shooting me across a grass median and into opposing lanes. My car was hit head-on at full speed. My car was a mangled pile of steel. The top of it had to be cut off to get me out. Intravenous drugs were administered to me as the car was cut open. I suffered multiple fractures of the pelvis, severe brain trauma, and injuries with blood clotting in the brain, resulting in paralysis on the left side. a fractured jaw, damage to my vision resulting in the constant vertigo and dizziness, and substantial muscle damage to my leg and back. The outpouring of support from fans and friends was overwhelming. My room was covered to the ceiling with cards, flowers, and balloons. I tried my best, under a cocktail of painkillers and a haze of trauma, to convince my nurses I was Jay-Z. They didn't buy it. When I got out, I had to relearn speech, memory skills, and other aspects of communication. After not walking for more than 2 months, I worked my dough legs well enough to get back on stage and perform with my bandmates for an unannounced acoustic show in New York, only 3.5 months after the accident, to the ravenous and shocked appreciation of several hundred people. On a bad day, the combinations of what I live with are nothing short of resolute, hopeless agony that is imprisoning and at times a suppressant of any true happiness. On an average day, however, I'm gracious and blessed to be above the ground, breathing in the gloriousness of life, and making art that stirs my heart, and others' hearts, something I never took for granted before, but that perhaps now has become that much more of a requisite to sustain me, like food and water.
3, 4.
To combat his crippling medical bills, Ween organized 2 concerts on October 7th and 8th at the Bowery Ballroom in New York, the proceeds of which would go to Claude. Claude Aid, as it was dubbed, would see Josh Freese fill in on drums. Freese is a prolific musician with a laundry list of credits, having been a member of bands like Devo, Guns N' Roses, The Vandals, A Perfect Circle, 9 Inch Nails, Sublime with Rome, and, most recently, Foo Fighters, before being dropped unceremoniously. Josh fit right in with Ween and picked up dozens of songs from the band's storied history with ease. It seemed only natural then that Freese would fill in for Claude during his long recovery, even during the recording sessions for the new album. With Claude's blessing, Freese officially became a temporary recording member of Ween. Recording sessions for the new album were slow and meticulous, as Ween and Weiss sought to bring the best versions of each song to the project. The band once again recorded the album in several different locations, including the previously flooded beach house from the Mollusk, which had seemingly become a lucky charm for the band. On August 5th of 2003, Ween released their 8th studio album, Quebec, on indie label Sanctuary Records. The cover for the album was adapted from the box art of a board game, Thorns, released by 3M in 1974. Dean had come across the game at a flea market before tasking Smay design artist Phil Yarnell with adding the Ween brothers to the cover, replacing the original couple. During the era when the album was written, Gene was dealing with the emotional fallout of the divorce with his first wife. As such, many songs on Quebec are not only earnest and candid, as tracks like She's Your Baby and Falling Out were on White Pepper, but also dark, much darker than anything they had produced prior. So while Quebec is still one of their less brown records in comparison to something like The Pod, it's far from fluff and can often venture into uncomfortable displays of emotional sincerity. But you wouldn't know that from the first track. The album begins with It's Gonna Be a Long Night, a red-hot thrash track. Long Night serves as a sequel of sorts to Stroker Ace from White Pepper, and sees Dean channeling his best Lemmy impression to deliver some of the band's fiercest vocals to date. While some see It's Gonna Be a Long Night as an outlier in the track list, I think it serves to herald the epic quality of the album you're about to experience. As a fun fact, Dave actually frequently sings a song live to allow Dean to focus on guitar, and in my opinion, he does a great job. Next is Zoloft, a piece of introspective psych pop about the pros and cons of being medicated. Zoloft was actually the song that convinced the band to bring Andrew Weiss on as producer. According to Gene, in his interview with Matt Gonzalez from Pop Matters, when I was writing Zoloft, there's this little taster, a backwards cymbal sound in there, and that keyed Andrew Weiss, because it's such an Andrew thing to do. Then I realized that he should probably just work on all the songs, so we got him back. After the blistering garage rock of the opener, Zoloft serves as a slight come down, and an omen of things to come. But it's not all doom and gloom just yet. First, there's Transdermal Celebration is an anthemic arena rock track that rivals even Buckingham Green and Spinal Meningitis in scale. Starting off strong with one of the band's greatest guitar licks, the song transitions into a recounting of the euphoria of a drug trip, followed by the bittersweet calm that comes after. The track also contains one of Diener's greatest solos of all time, which is equal parts soaring, iconic, and melodic, but also contains a hint of dissonance. The solo in question also happened to be played on a guitar belonging to none other than Carlos Santana. I'll let Dean explain in his interview with Scott Bernstein for Jam Bass. So we're in the middle of the session, and I get a phone call from my roadie, Nameless, who also worked for a backline company, Nameless, that supplied amps, drums, lights, etc. to bands touring in the Northeast. My roadie told me that Carlos Santana's equipment, including his guitars, had arrived via a trucking company that night at their depot. Carlos was recording an appearance on Good Morning America the next morning, and his equipment was to be delivered to the set in NYC in a few hours. What needed to be done was immediately clear to me. I had an opportunity to play the solo on Transdermal Celebration through Carlos Santana's amplifier and guitar. I had one shot at it. It meant taking a hard disk recorder to a storage space where all of Carlos' stuff was sitting in transit. I arrived at 2 a.m. We very carefully unpacked his equipment and set up his stage gear, and in one take, I recorded the guitar solo for Transdermal Celebration, the one that appears on the album, playing through Carlos Santana's guitar, pedal board, and amplifier. The whole thing took 10 minutes, and we were terrified we were going to get caught. A lot of people would have lost their jobs. We got the f*** out of there really fast after that. So the solo on Transdermal Celebration was played through all of Santana's shit and what resembled an early morning bank heist or something. And if you didn't love this album already, they've definitely got you now. Among His Tribe is an intimate folk number about family and tradition through the ages. The production brings to mind images of the desert, and the whole track is a masterclass in immersive songwriting, as you sink into the mindset of your distant ancestors. Then there's So Many People in the Neighborhood, which feels more like what you would expect to hear from a Ween track. Calling to mind previous tracks like Candy or even Blackjack from GodWeenSatan, Neighborhood still manages to bring a newfound maturity to the noise pop form factor, with the song spiraling into chaos before spacing out in a psychedelic bridge. The lyrics perfectly depict the mundane paranoia of living in the suburbs, and while it's the least anthemic or accessible track so far, it still manages to feel right at home. Speaking of anthemic and accessible, next is Tried and True. Ween's second most popular song, behind Ocean Man, of course, is, surprise surprise, really good. Featuring a gorgeous acoustic arrangement, some of Diener's best and most expansive vocals yet, and even a sitar solo. Tried and True is 4 minutes of pure bliss. Strangely enough, the song was featured in an episode of the CW show, Superman and Lois, which was titled, you guessed it, Tried and True. A real chicken and the egg scenario there. Happy Colored Marbles is a creepy psych number, prominently featuring the marimba, of all things. The track feels like it's teetering on the edge of chaos, before it finally implodes in the bridge with a barrage of manic distortion. Both thematically and sonically, this section in particular might be the heaviest Ween ever gets, and Happy Colored Marbles earns a spot among my favorite tracks on this album for that reason alone. Then there's Hey There Fancy Pants, which feels like sonic whiplash after the last track. Fancy Pants initially seems like a classic Ween comedy jaunt, but the goofy performances belie a darkness underneath that's merely hinted at with lines like, drinking down your dinner, all alone. When looked at through the macro lens, the song indicates a growing dissatisfaction with the obligation Ween felt to be a funny or edgy band. Fancy Pants and Quebec in general forecast in no uncertain terms the new sincerity Gene was aiming for in his songwriting. Captain is a spacey piece of near slowcore. The track calls to mind songs like Planet Caravan by Black Sabbath or Echoes by Pink Floyd and its ambience. It almost acts as a checkpoint of sorts in the album, a spot where you can catch your breath. Chocolate Town is a sweet country-esque ballad, seemingly about going through withdrawal and emerging victorious on the other side. Some claim it to be written by Mean Ween, detailing his time in jail after being busted for possession. The title is likely a reference to Hershey, PA, the home of Hershey's chocolate, thus, Chocolate Town. It's a sweet song about finding a new lease on life, which always elicits a big response from the crowd by the time Gene sings the Greyhound bus to Chocolate Town line. Next is I Don't Want It, a heartbreaking look at the inevitability of heartbreak. In many ways, it's a callback to the pop ballads of White Pepper, like She's Your Baby, but with the added bonus of an earth-shattering solo at the end from Gene. I Don't Want It is equal parts beautiful and brutally depressing, and it's not even the saddest song on the record. More to come. Then there's the F***ed Jam, a 3-minute instrumental loop that stops and starts again ad nauseum. Under the liner notes for the track, it just says, "Nope." Pure genius. Enough said. Alcan Road is another spacey post-rock track, in the vein of Captain, but a little less abstract this time. It's one of the few Ween studio tracks that's never been played live, which is a shame because it's a great song. One that draws to mind visions of fantasy realms and sci-fi adventures, and it leads perfectly into The Argus, one of Ween's greatest forays into prog of all time. A beautiful track based loosely on the all-seeing Argus from Greek legend. However, the original inspiration was a building in Claude's neighborhood, according to Dean on Facebook. Up the street from Claude's house on Route 31 in Hopewell, New Jersey, was this big rundown factory with this crazy, almost satanic symbol on the face of the building, and the name of the place was Argus International. That's what started it all. Finally, there's If You Could Save Yourself, You'd Save Us All, the heart-wrenching explosion of all the pent-up emotions Gene had been feeling in this era. Ending in his most desperate and emotional vocal performance, If You Could Save Yourself sees Ween temporarily dip its toes into Freeman territory, but man does it feel cathartic. This is Ween at their most sincere, while simultaneously feeling like an epic, satisfying conclusion to the greater narrative of the album. There was another song on the album that got cut at a very late stage, that being Ooh Va La. It was cut so late, in fact, that it shipped on the Japanese version of the album as track 3. As you can imagine, these versions of the album are in high demand by collectors. Andrew Weiss felt that Quebec saw the band get lost in the sauce on tracks like Captain and Alcan Road, and Hank Steamer's 33 1/3 on Chocolate and Cheese. Andrew was quoted as saying, "There's a lot to be said for 4 tracks. When you do something on 4 tracks, everything's gotta count. There's no room for fluff. And on some later stuff, we were maybe guilty of that. Quebec was definitely guilty of that. There was a lot of fluff there. By that point, Pro Tools had gotten really user-friendly, and you could just record like a million vocal tracks, and all that stuff. But that's exactly what makes Quebec so great. It's indulgent, it's melodramatic, and yes, at times, meandering. And I wouldn't have it any other way." Ween once again hit the road to promote Quebec in 2003 and 4, though in truth they had never really left the stage. Quebec received a much warmer reception across the board than White Pepper, but less fanfare overall due to its independent release. At this point, Ween had seemingly settled into a niche. The people that liked Ween were going to listen to the new Ween album, and album promo would come from a slow word-of-mouth fan campaign. In December, Claude would rejoin the band's live performances, having made a miraculous recovery, and things were seemingly back to normal. But after releasing 15 of their best songs ever, it felt like it would be a while until Ween could write another album's worth of new songs at a similar level of quality. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to revisit some of those hundreds of songs they had left on the cutting room floor.
We're holding out on the box set until somebody offers us like $5,000, in which case we'll bust back into these tapes, which are probably all demagnetized and deteriorated. Yeah. Then we'll pick all the wrong songs and put it out. Tons of stuff. Sell it for $16.99. When we're old and poor.
By 2005, Ween had officially released over 150 songs on various albums, singles, and EPs, but had seemingly recorded orders of magnitude more. Each album saw dozens of outtakes left on the cutting room floor, as the band voted on the few songs from their prolific output that would make each album's track list.
We've always been into the quantity.
Right.
Quantity before quality. Just make a million songs. But all 3 of our records so far have been weeded down from hundreds of songs each time.
Really?
Yeah, it's the same thing every time. Junior, me, and Andrew get together, make a big list, and then we all just vote on it.
And once Ween had finished an album cycle, they preferred to look ahead to the future, reinventing their sound and prioritizing new compositions. But as the wealth of unreleased songs piled up, the levee had to break eventually, And after the release of Quebec had seen the band exhaust 15 of their strongest new compositions, they found themselves looking to the past to fill their next release.
One, two, three, four.
In an interview with Flagpole in September of 2000, Dean had previously seemed hesitant to release a compilation album, only showing interest in releasing some outtakes from the Pod and Pure Guava era. We're still making good records as far as I'm concerned, and I don't want to do anything that's even slightly retrospective until I feel like it. What I would like to do is take our second and third record, the Pod and Pure Guava. We did them on 4-track in our apartment, and there were a million other tunes we did when we lived there that never got released. But they really are one record. And it's funny, people say Pure Guava is my least favorite, or the Pod is my favorite. But they're one record, they really are. So I'd like to take all the other stuff we didn't put on there. That would be a cool thing, with 4 discs with that shit. This idea was seemingly put on hold after pod-era cassettes like Bilboa, Big Timmy Wasserman, The Stallion, the Pork Roll Egg and Cheese on a Kaiser Bun tape, and the Eindhoven EP were found by fans and compiled online. Unfortunately, an issue that frequently crops up in the Ween fandom is that, after a long period of silence from the band, fans take it upon themselves to post leaked material online. This then results in Ween not officially releasing those songs, perpetuating the drought of Ween material. It's a vicious cycle, but one that was broken, if only briefly, by the release of Shinola Volume 1 on July 19th, 2005. The title of the new album was likely inspired by the saying, "You don't know your from Shinola," which I would hazard to guess the Ween brothers first heard from Diener's dad, much like Piss Up a Rope. While many tracks were simply remixed from old demos for inclusion on the album, some had elements re-recorded, like the vocals on Someday, and some were drastically re-edited, like Monique the Freak and Big Fat F***, each being 4 minutes shorter, while How High Can You Fly, strangely, is nearly a minute longer. The first track chosen for inclusion was pod-era outtake Tastes Good on the Bun, a sludgy brown track that, I have to admit, was a bold choice for the intro to the album. Despite starting conceptually as a Pod and Pure Guava compilation album, Tastes Good on the Bun is the only track from the band's brown era on the album, with the rest being from Chocolate and Cheese or later. When asked about the meaning of the song in an interview for Paste magazine by Matthew Snope, Gene was quoted as saying, "Usually it all tastes good on the bun, in my experience anyway." According to Brown Bass, the song was most recently performed live by Gene Ween, solo, in 2009, and boy oh boy would I've loved to hear how that turned out. Next is Boys Club, an upbeat gay anthem about hanging with the boys. It's a recording from the Mollusk era, from the band's first ever session with Glenn on keys, which would also see them record Dancing in the Show Tonight. The song features strong yacht rock inspiration, with Gene's vocal performance being inspired by the legendary Michael McDonald, who Ween had previously parodied on GodWeenSatan era outtake, "Sing Like Michael McDonald," the guy from the Doobie Brothers.
Hey Aaron, sing like the guy Michael McDonald from the Doobie Brothers.
Boys Club is all about good vibes. Whatever you're going through, it don't matter, cause you're always allowed at Boys Club. After the bitter pill of Quebec, it seemed like the band was trying to cleanse the palate with some classic Ween goofiness in the first 2 tracks. However, the next song reintroduces some of that 2000s era sincerity with I Fell in Love Today. The song is a low-key ballad centered around a gorgeous bass line that details the euphoria you feel at the beginning of a relationship. I Fell in Love Today was recorded during the Quebec era, but was left off the album, and I can only assume that was because it was too happy. Its optimistic Cloud9 new love worldview clashes with the down in the dumps divorce themes on Quebec, so I understand why it was scrapped. I'm just glad we got it eventually, because this is genuinely one of Ween's sweetest songs of all time. But if you thought this album was in danger of getting too sincere, the next track is Big Fat F***. Originally released on the 1999 Creators of the Sack mixtape on Ween.com, the Shinola version was drastically abridged from its original 7 minutes and 5 seconds, now clocking in at just 2:55. The song is similar to tracks like Candy from Chocolate and Cheese, or even Tastes Good on the Bun, with a repetitive hook uttered over a looping bass line. Unfortunately for humanity, this one has never been played live. and I just think that's a shame. Next is Gabrielle, which was one of the 2 songs selected as a single. It's a straight-ahead rocker in the vein of a classic Thin Lizzy or ZZ Top track that was written top to bottom by Dean. However, it manages to fit the 2000s pop rock vibe as well, being mixed like a White Stripes song. Gabrielle is so mature and straight ahead that I was shocked to discover that it's actually a Chocolate and Cheese era track, despite feeling totally out of step with that period in the band's history. Sort of like how Buckingham Green was being performed by the band back on the Pure Guava tour. As far as Ween goes, Gabrielle was actually a bit of a crossover hit, being played on the radio and eventually being featured in a Skoda car commercial in Germany. In some ways, Gabrielle is like the transdermal celebration of Shinola Volume 1, a mind-blowing, accessible rock track that's sure to convert even your most vanilla friends into Ween fans.
Ohne Zinsen und Anzahlung. Skoda. Simply clever.
Then there's Did You See Me, a beautiful, epic prog song that builds to a cacophony of synth noise before dropping into a devastating refrain. Did You See Me is another Mollusk outtake, probably cut because that prog niche was already being filled by Buckingham Green and the Golden Eel. But man, is this one a barn burner. An older mix with different vocals was played on Ween's MySpace page in October of 2007 as part of their Mollusk session stream, and is just further confirmation that for every fantastic officially released track, there was another future classic cut from the album in Sacrifice. Next is How High Can You Fly? A more dissonant yet equally epic track about continuing to conquer new challenges in life to reach higher peaks. Gene's vocals are flanged like crazy, which feels like a pod-era production choice, but this was actually another Creators of the Sack track. Interestingly, the original version is nearly a full minute shorter, with the Shinola version having an added verse at the beginning, though I put that verse in quotation marks. Overall, How High is just a fantastic psych track that calls to mind classics like Don't Sweat It from the Pod, and serves as a little injection of brown after 2 accessible tracks. Next is Transitions, a feel-good city pop jazz rock track that feels straight out of Japan in the 80s. It also feels strikingly like Mac DeMarco, who I've theorized for years was inspired by Ween. Not just this track either, as his early rock and roll nightclub material employs familiar Verisped vocals, and Hawakawani Se from the La Cucaracha sessions would fit right in on Mac's Here Comes the Cowboy. Transitions is yet another Mollusk outtake that also sees the return of Eddie Dingle. Sort of. Just a great summer vibes track. Next is Israel, a Kenny G-esque smooth jazz track, over which Gene reads the Mourner's Kaddish in his best deadpan rabbi voice. How this one has been played live multiple times while Alcan Road and So Many People in the Neighborhood have never been performed, I'll never understand. The Rift is a sci-fi psych track that details traveling through a wormhole to the Palace of Ice. It was shelved during the Chocolate and Cheese era before being submitted to 20th Century Fox for the X-Files movie soundtrack in 1998. But the studio instead went with the Beacon Light, and I can't say I'm surprised. Not only is the Rift nearly 6 minutes long, it's also pretty repetitive. And while it's never been my favorite Ween composition, I do think it deserves an inclusion here. It's also a regular on setlist for the Dean Ween group, so obviously it's a favorite of Deaner's. Next is Monique the Freak, the album's second single. I would call it Prince-inspired, but that would be the undersell of the century. It's basically Ween saying, we love Prince. See how much we love Prince? You should love Prince too. And I can't fault them for that. Monique the Freak is an absolute earthshaker, with one of the band's catchiest hooks of all time, paired with some of Dean's tightest guitar work. This is another one that got some radio airplay, and it's easy to see why. The Creators of the Sack version of the song sat at a staggering 10 minutes and 10 seconds, whereas the Shinola version was trimmed down to a respectable 6 minutes. And even this reflects the song's inspiration, with many of Prince's hits being much longer than the radio edit would suggest. Monique the Freak is a generational song, and a fantastic pick for this album's penultimate track. Finally, there's Someday, a gorgeous ballad that ends the album much in the same way White Pepper did with She's Your Baby. It's a sweet Quebec outtake, and one of the most quoted songs among fans. Because at the end of the roller coaster that was Shinola Volume 1, Someday is here to remind you that no matter how bad your week is, Tuesday is pizza day. Shinola was warmly met by fans and critics alike, though with less fervor than Quebec before it. Pitchfork gave the album a 7.6 out of 10, Tiny Mixtapes a 3.5 out of 5, and Sputnik a 3 out of 5. Enthused by fan reactions to finally getting official versions of tracks from the archives, Ween would also release Chocolate and Cheese outtake, Dirty Money, as a single 5 months after the album's release. This version was a minute longer than the track that was included in the recent Chocolate and Cheese Deluxe. For fans, Shinola was a welcome addition to the Ween catalog, allowing them to finally have an official way to hear many of their favorite outtakes and live staples. But by the time the Shinola era came to a close, it had been nearly 4 years since fans had heard any new compositions from the band. So when the band announced not one, but 2 new releases in 2007, you had to wonder, what would new material from Ween sound like? And would it live up to the standards set by Quebec? As the next era of Ween began, excitement ran high, as did, perhaps, unrealistic expectations.
So buds for a long time, where do you project yourself to be, like when you're their age, 60 years old?
I think by 60 years old, I probably will hope to be in like southern Florida or some typical thing like that. But when I'm like 40, I'd like to be in Ween still anyway.
Going into 2006, Ween had been on a real hot streak. After winning critical praise and garnering tens of thousands of new fans with the Mollusk, White Pepper, and Quebec, they had also proven that people would even buy their outtakes with Shinola Volume 1. But after getting more and more sincere as a band, eventually verging on being consistently depressing with Quebec, Ween felt it was time to return to their fun-loving roots and set out to do just that. But would they be able to recreate the magic of a pure guava or chocolate and cheese over a decade later? Or would this trip down memory lane turn out to be a rocky one?
Good songs for Ween.
In 2006, Ween rented a 200-year-old farmhouse to record demos of around 50 new compositions. And as a result of their choice of setting, the recording conditions were less than ideal. According to Dean, we wrote and recorded La Cucaracha in a rented, moldy 200-year-old farmhouse in our hometown of New Hope, Pennsylvania. It is one of the most disgusting places I've ever had the displeasure of working, and I'm sure that Jeaner and Andrew Weiss will back me up on that one. None of us will let our kids go there, I'm not lying to you. Right now, 9/6/2007, I have an upper respiratory infection that was initially spawned by working in our black mold-filled studio. Hell, I wouldn't even let my dog crap in that place. After we move out, I hope a tree falls on it, so they have to bulldoze the building to its foundation. Although, the house is already about to cave in on its own. The recording for the album was done on tape, rather than the digital workflow the band had adopted since Chocolate and Cheese, with Dean stating, "I also want to make a special point of mentioning that we recorded this record to tape, 24-track, 2-inch tape. I'm really less than thrilled that most people will probably download 2 tracks from it and listen to it on their iPods." After dozens of hours spent recording, the tracks were then post-mixed by Weiss and mastered by Howie Weinberg.
My name is Howie Weinberg. I am one of the top mastering engineers probably on the planet.
But the first fruits of this labor didn't turn out to be a full studio album. The band made the decision while producing their new full-length album to have the track list be just 13 songs long, due to the length of one track in particular. We'll get to that later. But this left many fully developed songs on the cutting room floor, and the boys were evidently not content to let them become outtakes that would later leak online. The solution was releasing a 5-track EP with 4 of the aforementioned songs, plus a remix of a track from the upcoming album. A taster of sorts for the new era of Ween. On June 19th, 2007, Choco Dog released the Friends EP. The first of the 5 tracks is the titular Friends, which ironically is actually a remix of the original song, which would appear on La Cucaracha. The remix, which was sourced from the demo recorded at the farmhouse, was produced by CJ Stone and DJ Voodoo of, get this, Crazy Frog fame, after Gene had thought out a quote, gay Euro DJ. According to Dean, in an interview with the AV Club, He felt so strongly about doing it that it was like, okay, let's see what happens. I figured in a million years he would never pull it off. Like, find a gay Euro DJ to do it, and it only took him about 5 seconds to find someone. He found the guy that did the Crazy Frog stuff. Then I had to cop to it. It was the first time we ever tried that. It was sort of an experiment, I guess, which I take absolutely no responsibility for. Not only was this version of Friends released by Ween, it was also released by Crazy Frog on Everybody Dance Now. If nothing else, the legacy of the Friends EP is making Gene Ween and Crazy Frog email pen pals, which is pretty cool if you ask me. By the way, thanks to Ben from the Crazy Frog team for getting in touch with me with some insider info about the song. Next is I Got to Put the Hammer Down, a slick electro-punk track with Dean on vocals, reminiscent of something like Johnny on the Spot. It's a fun track, and every time that chorus comes, it hits you like a freight truck. It's also become a mainstay and setlist for the Dean Ween group. King Billy is a reggae track and a collab with artist King Jammy, Michael McDonald, not that Michael McDonald, and the Firehouse Crew. Ween's attempts at reggae have never been my favorite, but this one isn't terrible. It's not as good as Nicole from GodWeenSatan, but it is markedly better than another track we'll get to later. Light Me Up is a Santana-esque Latin rock anthem with one of Ween's most memorable hooks. It captures a lot of the energy of White Pepper's Bananas and Blow, and is a real highlight from this era of the band. Finally, there's Slow Down Boy, a smooth, soulful gay ballad. While recording, Dean uploaded some super choppy footage of Gene performing the vocals to the song on YouTube, providing a rare look into the Ween production process. The EP was originally slated to drop in person at a Ween show on June 8th, before being sold online. But due to printing issues, Friends was pushed to come out concurrently on June 19th. Most fans enjoyed the Friends EP, but saw it as just a warm-up to the real deal that would be the full-length album. And they didn't have to wait long, because 4 months later, on October 23, 2007, Ween released La Cucaracha, in a joint drop between Choco Dog and Rounder Records. The reason for co-releasing on Rounder was presumably financial, as producing and shipping tens of thousands of copies of an album is a costly endeavor. According to Diener, this is also our first record on the Rounder label, and I feel obligated to mention how this came to pass. The guy from Rounder drove down to New Hope from Massachusetts and took us to lunch. We've been on a lot of labels the past 23 years and had a lot of lunches, and we've heard a lot of pitches. After making small talk for the first 20 minutes, I finally felt like I should ask him something, anything, since he drove all the way down here. The only thing I could come up with was, are there any other bands on Rounder comparable to Ween? I mean, when I think of Rounder Records, I think of all those Thorogood records, and mostly folk-type stuff. He said, no, not really. We all started laughing, and the decision was made in our minds right there that this was where we needed to be. Later that night, we watched the Red Sox game at our studio, then he drove back to Boston the next day. The track list for La Cucaracha was comprised of 13 of the fully mixed songs, not included on Friends. First, there was Fiesta, starting with an instrumental track with a first for Ween at that point, and it's a great tone setter for the album. The refrain from the horn section is ridiculously fun, as is the glitchy IDM drum breakdown. Next is Blue Balloon, a silly, bouncy track that feels very SpongeBob. The vocals were originally intended to be lo-fi and brown, but the band later decided to go with more poppy, modern Ween vocals. Next is the original Friends, which was, funnily enough, released after the remix on the titular EP. This version is more stripped down, without the EDM production, and I think we were spoiled by the EP version, frankly, which I find myself coming back to more often. If you're going to go for the chorus, a friend's a friend who knows what being a friend is, talking with a friend, I think you've got to go big, production-wise, to match that absurdity. Object is a Spanish-flavored ballad from the perspective of a psychotic masochist. It feels like it could have been influenced by Dexter, being inside the head of a sociopathic serial killer. Object has a great melody and progression, and features one of my favorite solos from this era of Ween. Learnin' to Love is a country hoedown, akin to Booze Me Up and Get Me High, or I've Got No Dark Side. It's a fun song, but unfortunately features a pretty grating hook. and in my opinion, it's sorely missing the Creek Boys. Next is My Own Bare Hands, a rollicking, hard-rocking Diener track, in the vein of It's Gonna Be a Long Night. Featuring some of the band's funniest and raunchiest lyrics barked through Diener's famous Lemmy impression, My Own Bare Hands consistently ranks among fans' favorite tracks on La Cucaracha, and it's not hard to see why. The Fruit Man is a low-key reggae track which documents an interaction Gene witnessed in Jamaica, possibly on the vacation that he, Dean, and Kramer took during the pod era. According to Gene, in an interview with Paste by Matthew Snope, I was inspired to write this after our trip to Jamaica. It basically covers a day between the fishermen and the fruit sellers. One would think with two different products they'd get along. No, they don't. It's a dog-eat-dog world on the beach. People hustling for fruit and fish and fruit. No trust. Okay, though. There are never really hard feelings. Next is Spirit Walker, which ended up being one of the most controversial Ween songs for fans. Not because of the composition, performance, or lyrics, but rather the vocal production. On the track, Gene's voice is auto-tuned severely, contrasting harshly with the clean, natural sound of the instrumental. While many see this as an ill-fated foray into production experimentation by Ween and Weiss, there's an argument to be made that the song is a parody of the pop music scene in 2006, when it was becoming commonplace to auto-tune vocals. Either way, regardless of the intention, it is a little difficult to listen to the song, which, knowing Ween, may have very well been the intention. Shame Maker is a silly track that feels like something out of the pure Guava era, where Gene, in a thick Philly accent, describes therapy as if it's body horror, with lyrics like, "Feel it in the belly like a yellow worm with teeth." I really dig this one, and my hot take is that if this had been released by Sum 41 or Alien Ant Farm, it would have been a top 10 hit. Next is Sweetheart in the Summer, another Diener track. As an aside, if one person was benefiting from this era, it was undoubtedly Diener. After only having one track every other year from the Chocolate and Cheese era through Quebec, Diener had 3 tracks in 2007 alone, those being I Got to Put the Hammer Down, My Own Bare Hands, and of course, Sweetheart in the Summer. True to its title, Sweetheart is a sweet song about young love, backed by orchestral elements. It's just a sincere, good vibes track which acts as the yang to the yin of the crass aggressiveness of Bare Hands.
I'm going to let you do anything you want to me sexually in this costume. So I'm pretty easy to reach on the...
Lullaby is yet another sweet, soft song, this time featuring the harp in its instrumentation. Lullaby is one of my favorite Gene compositions of all time. It's so calming, and this absolutely should have been promoted as a hit for children's music. Though I guess the lyrics of some of the other tracks earlier in the album probably dissuaded that course of action. Next is Woman and Man, a galloping prog rock epic that clocks in at a monumental 11 minutes. Originally written as a simple 4-minute jam, Woman and Man quickly ballooned in size to become the longest Ween track on a studio album, and is half the length of side 2. The lyrics of Woman and Man detail the creation and evolution of humankind throughout the eons, 2001 style. Again, very prog rock. These guys know how to do a genre pastiche. According to Ween Wiki creator Plump Buck Mulligan from Personal Correspondence, the flute featured on the track was played by Debbie Reichart, the partner of Andrew Weiss. Finally, there's Your Party, a soothing sax-driven jam about having the best time at a party with the wife. The sax was performed by the late great David Sanborn, who apart from being an accomplished solo artist, had played on tracks by artists like Bruce Springsteen, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, Elton John, the Eagles, and Sting. It's a sweet track, and really that's one of the major themes I would say permeates both Friends and La Cucaracha. Genuine sweetness without a layer of irony. Quebec saw the band expressing sincere heartbreak, and La Cucaracha and Friends saw the band proclaiming genuine joy. In addition to the aforementioned tracks, Ween also released Bag of Fat, a bonus track on the iTunes release of the album. This is a pretty underrated song that I definitely think should have been included on the album, or at least Friends. And if it was cut because the album was too long, well, I think maybe they should have cut Spirit Walker in favor of this one. 2007 really saw the band expanding its scope instrumentally, having EDM production on Friends and Hammerdown, trumpets on Fiesta, an orchestra on Sweetheart in the Summer, harp on Lullaby, flute on Woman and Man, and of course saxophone on Your Party. Not only was it one of their most diverse albums sonically, rivaled only by Chocolate and Cheese, it also saw the band tackle a wider breadth of topics lyrically, ranging from summer love to serial killers, macho aggression to therapy, and the entire history of humanity. While many, myself included, put La Cucaracha and Friends lower on their Ween rankings than their earlier releases, there's no doubt that there's a lot to love about 2007 as a Ween fan. And though the reception to the material was more lukewarm than it had been for previous album cycles, we had no idea just how good we had it. Surprisingly, based on how I've described it previously, La Cucaracha actually fared okay in the music press. Stephen Irwin of AllMusic gave the album 4 stars, the AV Club gave it an A-, Blender gave it 3.5 stars, and Time Off gave it a startling 5 out of 5. However, several publications were more mixed on the album, with Pitchfork giving it a 6.2, NME giving it a 5 out of 10, and Drowned in Sound slapping the album with a 4 out of 10. The general consensus for fans at the time seemed to be that they enjoyed lots of songs from the era, but found the releases as a whole to be disappointing in comparison to Quebec, White Pepper, and the Mollusk. However, many have re-evaluated Friends and La Cucaracha in a more favorable light during this drought of new Ween material. So despite not getting a royal welcome, so to speak, the 2007 releases didn't seem like a total bust for Ween. Fans were definitely hungry for more, and were looking to the horizon for the band's next release. But I haven't been totally honest with you. In this video, I've been acting like things were business as usual for Ween. Like this was just another album, and that the next episode would be yet another success story. But in truth, trouble was brewing behind the scenes. After playing with each other, touring with each other, and even occasionally living with each other, Gene and Dean Ween had begun to grow apart. There's a quote that, to this point, I've left out of the episode. One that shocked me when I read it. In a 2014 American Songwriter interview with Jeaner by Chris Rutledge, Gene was quoted as saying, "I don't think I could pick one record over another. Except La Cucaracha. That was a big piece of shit. I think the songs on it were good, or a bunch of songs, but overall, that was a big clue. Mickey and I were finito." As the Friends and La Cucaracha era came to a close, a rift was growing in the band, and great adversity was on the road ahead. It remained to be seen, could the Ween brothers weather the storm, or would this be the end of one of the greatest stories in experimental music?
Not that there was any sarcasm or this or that with Ween. I mean, people always like to think that we were taking the piss out of something or this or that. You know, it's real easy to criticize it, where I think all we were trying to do is write good songs. But these are good songs, and there's no wiggle room for anything. So it's just good music.
What does Ween think of poetry?
We're taking some time apart.
During the La Cucaracha era, fans felt a palpable shift in vibes from Ween. The tracklist of La Cucaracha seemed to be divided into 2 clear camps: Jeaner songs and Deaner songs, rather than being a collaborative effort. Almost like the Beatles' White Album. People also started to sense tension from Ween on the road, with the usually upbeat and energetic band seeming more lackadaisical on stage. But there was no way for fans to know that this would be the beginning of the end for Ween, at least in the way it had existed for nearly 3 decades prior. From 2008 onward, both fans and the band themselves were in for a rough ride, full of pitfalls, windfalls, and hopes dashed against the rocks.
Here's the story of a band you really should try to hear, Ween.
From 2007 to 2010, things seemed to be business as usual for Ween, with the band playing around 50 gigs a year, with many of those shows being sold out. On November 25th of 2008, Ween would release At the Cat's Cradle 1992, a live CD and DVD bundle with material dating back to the Pure Guava tour, which was described by Diener as being so brown, it's almost black. During this time, Diener began devoting more time to fishing, getting a license to operate a fishing vessel and taking anglers out on trips through Mickey's Guide service. He also began a web show, Brownie Troop Fishing Show, which would continue until 2011.
Towards the stern of the boat. Walk towards the stern of the boat. This way,
I don't know where the
This way, outside. Walk towards me.
Diener would even frequently fish with Primus frontman Les Claypool, and pitched a reality show featuring the two, which would be produced by South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Diener, however, continued to create music. He and Dave formed the Gene Ween Band to perform more intimate shows featuring stripped-down versions of Ween songs, outtakes never before heard live, and new original material, which many theorized at the time would be on Ween's next album. In February of 2010, Ween released a single in support of charity organization Target Cancer, DC Won't Do You No Good, a pop rock banger with one of Diener's best guitar tones ever. In an interview with the National Post for an article titled Ween, a Band That Doesn't Suck, Diener revealed that the band had scheduled studio time in the winter of 2010 to begin work on their next studio album. Things seemed to be on the up and up for Ween. In January of 2011, Ween traveled to Vancouver to begin a tour that would see them work their way down the West Coast into the US. However, their first show at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre on the 24th would turn out to be an ill omen. Throughout the band's history, Gene and Dean had never shied away from admitting their issues with substance use. Dean's tour diaries from the White Pepper era paint a harrowing picture of getting blackout wasted every night, sleeping until the afternoon, playing a 3-hour show under the heat of stage lights, then rinse and repeating throughout the tour. I'm sure you can see how this created an unhealthy environment for the band. I want to be clear that this next section is not meant to make fun of or belittle anyone in any way. Substance issues are a serious problem that anyone can deal with, and Gene has since accomplished the Herculean task of getting completely clean and seems to be happy and healthy in 2025, which deserves serious accolades. But the purpose of this show is to chronicle the history of the greatest band in the world, and for better or worse, this is a part of Ween history. On that fateful show in Vancouver, things started out sort of innocuously. The band launched into La Cucaracha opener Fiesta to thunderous applause from the audience, but keen-eared attendees began to notice that Gene's tambourine playing was off-rhythm, with one audience member commenting, "Okay kids, that's the worst tambourine playing you're ever going to hear," probably thinking it was just Gene being silly. But as the show went on, it became clear that something was wrong. Gene's vocals seemed off-key and strained as the band really tried to up the energy to compensate. 3/4 of the way through the set, during a cover of the Carpenters' Superstar, Gene laid down on the stage and stayed there for the remainder of the song. 2 songs later, after the band's cover of Ace of Spades, Dean and Dave walked off the stage, leaving Gene in the spotlight as Glenn and Claude switched instruments, just trying to have fun and make the most of the night. As Gene performed Birthday Boy, one of Ween's first masterpieces of sincere songwriting, the crowd really seemed to grasp that something was wrong. It was then that Claude and Glenn exited the stage, leaving Gene to perform I Don't Want It, Sarah, Kansas City Star, and Don't Sweat It by himself under the stage lights and the scrutiny of the crowd. In an interview with Casey Moffett from Chicagoist in 2015, Gene made a statement about the incident, saying, "You don't blow it on stage, lying on your back, screaming nonsense in front of 5,000 people, and not try to change something. Chances are, when you're doing something like that, you've got to do something differently." Getting ahead of myself slightly, Gene would later write a song about that night on the Freeman album, with a song called Covert Discretion, which was written a week after the Vancouver incident, while still on tour. The song, as painful as a fresh wound, features vulnerable lyrics reading, "Another chance now, I'm on the stage again, but this time I don't fly. You all just left me, just walked away, alone up there to die. It was the next day, got a couple calls making sure I'm alive." Despite the trauma of the Vancouver show, amazingly, Ween kept their commitment to their next gig, playing Seattle the very next night with an impressive 31-song set. Then Portland the next night, Oakland on the 28th, and LA on the 29th. Ween's tenacity in this period was really amazing. On August 11th, 2011, Dean posted a 101-minute-long compilation to his Facebook page called The Caesar Demos, with Caesar being the working title for Quebec. The 29-track compilation consists of early demos of Quebec tracks, as well as 15 outtakes and then unreleased tracks. With the post, Dean commented, "When we were doing this, we still had Claude Coleman on drums. He eventually got into a major car wreck and wasn't around when it finally came time to make the real record. Almost all of this was recorded at our beach house in Holgate, New Jersey, on the 16-track tape. This isn't even all of the tunes that we ended up choosing from, just the ones I happened to burn to CD before we drove home from the beach every week. Hope you dig it for what it is." The release of Caesar was very exciting for fans as it offered a wealth of new Ween songs, as well as valuable insight into the behind-the-scenes of Quebec. However, unlike Creators of the Sack, the release of Caesar seems to have been a surprise to Gene. It was initially reported that Gene was furious with Dean, but I think that's blown out of proportion. The interview that inspired this rumor from River City's Reader, done a week after the release of Caesar, simply reads, "He never told me about it. He's always done that periodically. He released a couple songs that he should have asked me, but he didn't. I'm glad the fans are happy." Jeff Ignatius goes on to say, "When I asked Freeman which songs he would have preferred to be consulted on, he said, 'I'll address that with him.'" For the remainder of 2011, Ween continued to perform sporadic shows, leading up to 2 shows on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in Denver, with the last song the band performed being the Blarney Stone. Throughout the first few months of 2012, there was near radio silence from the band. Then, on May 29th of 2012, a bomb dropped. In a surprise interview with Rolling Stone, Gene, Aaron Freeman, announced that he was, quote, retiring Gene Ween. He was further pressed by interviewer Darren Levin. So does that mean the end for Ween, the band that Freeman formed with high school friend Mickey Melchiondo, aka Dean Ween, in New Hope, Pennsylvania in the mid-80s? Pretty much, yeah. It's been a long time, 25 years. It was a good run. Ween manager Greg Frey posted a statement on Facebook stating that Aaron had chosen to end his musical relationship with Ween so he could, quote, more fully explore and pursue his solo career. Dean would respond on Facebook, writing, "This is news to me. All I can say, for now, I guess." Later, in an interview with MTV, Dean would say, "I can only speak for myself, but as far as I'm concerned, as long as Aaron and I are both alive on this planet, Ween is still together. We've never broken up. The idea of quitting is just laughable. This isn't something you can quit. This is a life sentence." A lot of Ween fans at the time felt sort of blindsided by the announcement, and understandably so. But there was a lyric from Covert Discretion that I held back earlier, which I think will shed some light on the situation. "Man, you gotta end this. Just walk away, your money or your life. So save your judgments for someone else. Be grateful. I save me from myself." And that's really what's important here. Aaron quitting Ween wasn't just about focusing on a solo career. The life of hard partying and loneliness on the road was killing him, and he made the right choice for himself to get out of that situation and change his life for the better. In May of 2012, Gene released a project that he had been working on since March of the previous year, an album of Rod McEwen covers entitled Marvelous Clouds. The album was spearheaded by Ben Vaughn, the producer of 12 Golden Country Greats, and features 13 Good Vibes McEwen covers performed by session players and Gene Ween.
I think I've been naturally gravitating towards getting into more of a soft rock or an easy thing. Starting with, on the last Ween record, I wrote Your Party, and that was sort of me going off into this weird direction, and I'd like to pursue that. So the Rod McEwen stuff is right up my alley. It's exactly the kind of music that I like to make.
The album is a fun listen, but was disappointing to fans who were looking for original material from Aaron post-Ween. However, at the gigs promoting the album, Gene and Dave would play Ween songs alongside the tracks from Marvelous Clouds. Meanwhile, Dean stayed busy by reuniting his band with Guy Heller, Moist Boys, and by forming the Dean Ween Group with Claude, Glenn, and Dave from Ween. Moist Boys would record and release their 5th album in 2013, while Dean Ween Group played gigs throughout the hiatus. The Gene Ween Band would also occasionally play gigs during this period, which I'm sure left Dave feeling like a kid caught in the middle of a divorce. In May of 2014, Gene would release Freeman, his first solo record of original material since Synthetic Socks in 1987. Mixed by White Pepper producer Chris Shaw, Freeman very much feels like a return to early 2000s era Ween, with slick production, poppy hooks, and sincerity abound, and features some of Gene's greatest compositions of all time. Throughout history, we see time and time again that adversity breeds some of the best and most interesting art, and Freeman is certainly in that camp. Akin to the circumstances surrounding Quebec, Freeman was written during a period of great upheaval for Aaron, and the music obviously helped him reach some sort of catharsis. I'll be diving into the Freeman album track by track in a future extras video, but for now I'll just say that it features a wide swath of lyrical subjects, from personal turmoil to historical epics to silly ballads. And while its sonic profile is less varied than most Ween albums, mostly sticking to pop rock and folk, the songwriting is consistently strong enough to keep it engaging throughout. While of course there were fans who weren't satisfied with anything less than a proper new Ween album, Freeman was a huge success critically for Aaron, and must have felt like a decisive victory in such an uncertain time. In 2015, the Dean Ween Group released its first single, a cover of the Eagles of Death Metal's I Love You All the Time, for charity project the Play It Forward campaign, which also featured artists like Florence and the Machine and Jimmy Eat World. Then, without warning, on November 16th, 2015, a post appeared on Ween.com announcing that Ween was reuniting, initially just for 2 shows on the 12th and 13th of February 2016. After selling out almost immediately, the band added another date on the next day, Valentine's Day. After the success of that 3-day run, Ween continued playing gigs sporadically to consistently sold-out crowds, with 2+ hour-long set lists that saw the band feature fan favorites and debuting classic tracks that had never been played live before that point. Many interpolated that the reason for the reunion was that Gene had proven to himself that his sobriety was strong over those 4 long years, and was ready to test the waters on returning to the limelight. And good for him. I think congratulations are in order. On October 21st, 2016, the Dean Ween Group released the Diener album, and just 1 month later, Ween would release GodWeenSatan Live, a recording of their New Hope GodWeenSatan anniversary show on September 14th, 2001, just 3 days after 9/11 and 70 miles from New York City. With these 2 releases, alongside the fairly steady stream of live shows, it finally felt like things were heating back up for Ween, and that maybe that next studio album was right on the horizon. Ween played 51 shows in 2017, matching the pace that the band had set pre-breakup. In 2018, Ween surpassed themselves with 58 shows. And on March 9th, 2018, the Dean Ween Group released Rock 2, their second studio album. On June 1st, 2018, Warner Brothers released Bananas and Blow, a compilation of Ween tracks that Warner Brothers had the rights to, that was not okayed by the band. Dean took to the Ween Appreciation Society on Facebook to write, "Just FYI, though you probably already figured it out yourselves, Warner Bros. Went and released a Ween Greatest Hits, and we have none, without us knowing. If they had just picked up the phone, we could have helped make it something special. The song choices seem kind of random to me. A lot of GodWeenSatan on there, which I didn't even know they owned. There's a lot I don't know though, admittedly. Anyhow, carry on." In 2020, many Ween shows scheduled for the fall were postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and were rescheduled for June of the next year. However, many of these makeup shows were also cancelled, with Ween only playing 14 shows in 2021, all of which occurred after August. In August of 2022, Ween performed at the South Park 25th anniversary show, along with Primus, Rush, and of course, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. In 2024, in preparation for the 30th anniversary of Chocolate and Cheese, Ween announced 2 exciting developments. First, the band would embark on a tour, celebrating both the 30th anniversary of Chalk and Cheese and the 40th anniversary of the band itself, culminating in a show in Philly on September 27th, where Ween would play the entirety of Chocolate and Cheese from cover to cover. Next was a deluxe remaster of the album, with a second disc full of outtakes and early versions of album tracks, which was set to release on August 2nd, 2024. One of these things did not go to plan. In April, Ween canceled their planned shows that month, with Dean taking to social media to say, "For the majority of my life, I've been blessed enough to have a career doing the thing that I love the most. This privilege has never been lost on me. The fact that the music reaches other people and means so much to them is something that I never take for granted. and for which I am truly grateful all of the time, every time we perform. At this moment in time, though, I need to step away from performing live in order to preserve my mental and spiritual well-being, and instead focus on myself and loved ones. I know this will come as a disappointment, and with great inconvenience to many people who bought tickets and made travel plans. And for this, I sincerely apologize. I look forward to returning to the stage with the enthusiasm, joy, and renewed sense of inspiration that our fans deserve, and that I require of myself when we play live. Thank you, and God bless. Diener. Gene tried to make up for the disappointment by playing a surprise solo show on 4/20 in Seattle, but the rest of the band's tour dates were pushed back to August. On August 2nd, the deluxe version of Chocolate and Cheese was released to great fanfare. Many of the band's most beloved outtakes were now available officially in high def, as were several tracks that had never been heard before, even by the most die-hard devotees. That night, Ween played the Kettle House Amphitheater in Missoula with an epic 31-song set. Then, the next night in the same venue, featuring the live debut of Makin' Love in the Gravy. The next day, the band traveled to Washington to play the sold-out Spokane Pavilion. This 32-song set featured all of the hits, like Transdermal Celebration, Bananas and Blow, Ocean Man, Buckingham Green, The Mollusk, Roses Are Free, and Birthday Boy, as well as unreleased outtakes and deep-cut fan favorites from the band's Brown era. It was the Ween show to end all Ween shows, and how I wish that was just a figure of speech. On August 6th, the day they were supposed to play a show in Seattle, Ween canceled the rest of their tour dates, leaving only the Chocolate and Cheese show on the agenda. This time, the announcement came, not from Dean, but from Ween management, and was just about how to get a refund. Something was definitely wrong. That day, Gene tweeted, "Hey guys, I've been getting tons of messages. Know that I'm perfectly fine and just as disappointed. Love, Gene." On August 29th, Ween once again posted a statement, reading, "It is with sincere regret and heavy hearts that Ween must make the decision to step away from the stage for the foreseeable future. This includes next month's sold-out Chocolate and Cheese 25th anniversary show at the Mann Music Center in Philadelphia. Despite 3 great shows this summer, it's becoming clear that touring and performing is too taxing on Diener's mental health to continue. As always, we thank you for the love, dedication, and ongoing support." Many fans were obviously disappointed with the way the cancellations were handled, but most seasoned Ween fans understood that Dean was more important than any show, and didn't want to see another Vancouver incident take place. So we waited and bid our time. While talking with Jay Interviews on YouTube, Klob was asked about the status of Ween. Not as an impatient fan, but as a concerned friend, genuinely interested in how things were going. Pretty bluntly, Klob stated, "There's basically nothing new to report along those lines from anyone. I think everyone is still kind of in a holding pattern, and everyone is hoping for the best for everybody involved, including the sort of primary person, which is the attention focus of everything. You know, Big Diener. I think everybody probably has a notion that it'll come back around at some point, just because it kind of has to, because that's the nature of music and creating. I don't know anybody who retires from music. It's just not possible physically, emotionally, spiritually. I don't think there's any chance of it ever going away with any kind of real permanence." Sounds familiar. But with no new sense, we'll just have to wait and see. After 40 years of history, Ween seemed to be in an existential jeopardy. Whether they would ever return to stage or studio again was completely unpredictable. So until that fateful day, if it ever comes, when the lights go up and the crowd erupts, as Claude sits behind the kit, Dave picks up his bass, Glenn takes to the keys, and Gene and Dean Ween step into the spotlight, all we can do is hold on to the memories, playing the albums, watching videos from tour, and reminiscing on the history of Ween.
What's the proverb, asshole? What are you saying? What? Drums?